My sister locked me in a basement while I was pregnant. Parents cut her wedding funds after I fell and nearly lost my baby. After 3 years of trying, several rounds of IVF, and what seemed like an endless amount of suffering, I, 33F, am currently 3 months pregnant. My parents have been incredibly supportive during this entire ordeal, so we told them in private a month ago. There was only calm happiness between us, no big reveal, no social media post. In addition, I wanted to be farther along in my pregnancy before making a big announcement, so I didn't want to inform too many people outside of my parents and my husband's parents. Last weekend was my sister's engagement party. Let's call her Emily, 29F. Emily has always had a lot to offer. Being the center of attention is something she enjoys. She performed stunts all over the place as a child to maintain her fame. Holidays with the family. The star was Emily. Birthdays of friends? She somehow made herself the center of attention. Since I simply lacked the energy to oppose her, I've lived my entire life letting her have her way. I didn't want the party to be about me, but I did expect some small drama. Since I've been feeling a lot of fatigue lately, I intended to keep in the background, help Emily, and depart early. In order to evade inquiries, I even wore loose clothing and refused to discuss my pregnancy with anyone. Up until my mother pulled me away during the celebration, everything was going smoothly. Since the pregnancy had been difficult thus far, she simply wanted to see how I was feeling. I've had the worst of the early symptoms, so I was happy to have some time to chat to my mother, who was the only one who truly knew how I was feeling. We moved to a secluded area to talk away from the guests. Unfortunately, things took a very other turn when Emily overheard us. In the blink of an eye, Emily went from 0 to 100. Furious, she interrupted the discourse and accused me of trying to take her thunder. I was really perplexed. I attempted to clarify that we were merely having a private talk and that I wasn't making any announcements, as I had previously informed Mom and Dad weeks prior. Emily, however, was having none of it. She said that I was being self-centered and that I couldn't bear to give her a day to herself. Right there, she created a big commotion, and people began to take notice. I felt ashamed. It seemed as though she wasn't even paying attention to me when I insisted that I didn't intend for any of this to occur. She was certain that my purpose in attending her party was to spoil her moment. Emily persisted because she is unable to let things go. She claimed that this was my usual behavior, that I was envious of her, and that I always had to make things about me. I wanted to get out at that time because I was so overwhelmed. But Emily stormed off, so I didn't have to. My mother simply persuaded me to attend the party in order to help my sister. I also reasoned that I could go back to Emily and properly explain what had happened if I allowed her some time to calm down. Once more, I was spared the trouble. Emily came up to me out of nowhere, wearing a strange smile. "I would like to see something in the basement," she remarked. She felt I would like anything about a memento from our early years. To be honest, I didn't give it much thought at the moment. I assumed this was her attempt to make things more amicable. She slammed the door and locked it as soon as I entered the basement, but I followed her downstairs. I went cold. She laughed, and I could hear it through the door. She said it was retaliation for my attempt to make me the focus of her engagement celebration. I knocked and told her to open the door since I initially believed she was kidding, but she didn't. I was left stranded down there as she continued to giggle and left. Panic struck me hard at that time. I wasn't feeling well to start, and it was chilly and dark. The nausea and tension came on full force. As my mind raced with ideas on how I may escape the basement, I began to pace back and forth. I saw that I might be able to climb out of a window. I located a crate under the window and climbed upon it because I needed a boost to pull my body out. Unfortunately, I was in such a panic that I was unaware of how shaky and lightheaded I was. Halfway up on the box, my foot slipped, and I fell, crashing hard on my stomach and side. It was horrifying how much pain rushed through me. In an attempt to determine whether the baby was all right, I laid there for a while, gasping. My heart was pounding, and I broke down in tears of fear and annoyance. Worst-case possibilities kept coming to mind. What if this fall resulted in a miscarriage? What if Emily's dumb joke caused something to happen to my baby? I made an effort to gather myself and gradually succeeded in sitting down on the floor in a more comfortable position. It seemed like forever, but I'm not sure how long I was down there. It must have been at least an hour before anyone came looking for me. I gripped my knees, sat on the chilly floor, and did my best to keep from having a panic attack. Finally, on the other side of the door, I heard my husband's voice calling my name and footsteps. When I knocked feebly on the door, he unlocked it and roughly dragged me out. He sounded desperate. After glancing at me, he declared that we had to depart right now. I didn't protest because I was so afraid and in so much agony. I tried not to cry or stress out during the whole vehicle ride as we hurried to the emergency room. Whether this was it, or if I had lost the baby because my sister couldn't stand someone else receiving attention for 5 minutes, was all I could think about. They performed an ultrasound at the hospital. I barely managed to hold my breath the entire time. The doctor stated it was a close call, but fortunately the baby was unharmed. The result might have been worse if I had fallen more forcefully. I was both emotionally spent and relieved. My husband was incensed and informed me he would not tolerate this. He called my parents right away to let them know what had transpired. No one had been given an explanation because we had left the party so quickly. My spouse requested that my parents have a firm conversation with Emily and inform her that we would not be seeing her again until after I gave birth. Believe me, I am incredibly thankful to have a husband that aggressively defends me. We ultimately spent several hours in the emergency room before I was stable enough to return home. The party had long since ended by the time we returned home, and my phone was exploding with texts from my parents. At first, I didn't respond to any of them because I simply wanted to go to sleep and forget that the day had even occurred. After texting them to reassure them that I was fine, my husband turned off his phone as well. I learned what had transpired after we left when my folks phoned me again the following morning. My folks were apparently rather perplexed by what was happening when we hurried over to the emergency room. Since my husband had made a little commotion by asking Emily where I was, they made an effort to get Emily to tell them what had happened. My parents were incensed when my husband later called them from the hospital to inform them of Emily's actions. In front of everyone who was still at the party, my parents chastised Emily right away for locking me in the basement. Calling it a harmless prank that went too far, my mom attempted to minimize it, but my dad wasn't buying it. Given everything I had gone through to become pregnant, he was incensed that Emily would act in such a careless manner. When he finally told Emily that enough was enough, he made the momentous revelation that my parents would no longer be providing any financial support for Emily's wedding and honeymoon. My parents had always expressed their desire to financially support Emily and me during our significant life events. They had planned to support Emily in the same way that they had supported my wedding. Emily, regrettably, never imagined that they would ever break their word. Emily went totally crazy. Reiterating that I had destroyed her life, she broke down in tears in front of everyone. She accused me of doing all of this on purpose and referred to me as evil. I wasn't shocked when my parents later informed me that they had never witnessed Emily act so strangely. When things didn't go her way, Emily would always react negatively. She pleaded with my parents to change their minds, but my father refused to budge. Ever since, Emily and my mother have been bombarding me with calls and texts. My mother keeps urging me to speak with my father and persuade him to reconsider, but I informed her that I was done. I'm not going to ignore Emily's transgression in an effort to maintain harmony. Naturally, Emily has been bombarding my phone with every possible abuse. She is accusing me of being responsible for everything, claiming that nothing of this would have occurred if I had simply kept quiet. She maintains that I have ruined her life and that her fiancé is now beginning to question if he truly wants to wed her. A part of me feels bad, but I also know that I'm not to blame. I still feel horrible though. I can't help but feel that I must be at fault in some way, even though my husband and father have both told me that I'm not. Is it my fault that my sister's engagement, wedding, and honeymoon were ruined? First update. I had no idea my post would become that popular. I want to start by saying how much I appreciate all of the comments and support on my first post. Reading them has been really beneficial. It gives me comfort to know that I'm not alone in my feelings. Before I give you an update on what's happened since my last post, I'd like to address some questions that many people had about whether my parents ever gave me preferential treatment or whether Emily and I had a history of animosity. I wouldn't say my parents showed preference, to be honest. Growing up, my parents were actually fairly fair. Despite their best efforts to treat us all fairly, Emily only received somewhat more attention due to her status as the family's baby. But Emily seemed to become an attention seeker and self-centered person as a result of that little more attention. No matter the occasion, she was the child who would act out if someone else was given the limelight. To keep the peace, my parents largely caved into her rather than establishing limits. Therefore, Emily obviously got away with much more than I ever did, even if I wouldn't call it favoritism. I've tried to maintain harmony between us for the majority of my life. Since it was simpler to let her have her way than to argue, I learned to do so. In addition, I always believed that it was my responsibility as the older sister to be the more responsible one and avoid upsetting anyone. But Emily always managed to drive me to the edge, no matter how hard I tried. I had to balance not to stomp on her toes so she wouldn't blow up at every family gathering. I suppose that contributes to her current sense of entitlement. The much anticipated update is now here. Emily lost it all after my parents stopped sponsoring her wedding. She accused me of stealing her moment and wrecking her life in a lengthy text message the next day. By the way, she didn't say sorry for locking me in the basement, rather, she went on to add that I took it too seriously and that it was only a joke. She went into full assault mode when I didn't answer. I staged the entire pregnancy crisis to get attention, Emily began telling everyone in the family. The rest of our family soon learned that I was pregnant when my husband hurried me to the emergency room that day, which was not something I wanted at all. I've had to deal with the rest of my family contacting me in addition to my sister's wild calls and texts. These communications were initially intended to ask how I was doing and to offer congratulations. However, they gradually started to seem strange. Many family members began questioning me about how I could pretend to be pregnant in order to undermine Emily. I didn't know what was happening. Emily, it turned out, had started circulating the rumor that I had arranged to get hurt in order to spoil her engagement celebration. She spread the word among our family members that I was some malevolent genius who attempted to ruin her life. It was quite painful when multiple family members contacted me, perplexed and unsure if the pregnancy was genuine. Ava, one of my cousins, even questioned me about whether I was fabricating the pregnancy to get even with Emily. It was crazy. My mom has been attempting to remain impartial throughout this, which genuinely feels like a betrayal, which has made matters worse. She insists that I must be the stronger one and that Emily is simply anxious about the wedding. But when my own sister is spreading false information about me at one of the most joyous moments of my life, how am I meant to be the stronger person? It wears you out. I made the decision to cut ties with my mother as well after attempting to argue with her without success. She arrived at my residence approximately 2 weeks following Emily's engagement celebration. My husband urged me not to open the door, but I foolishly assumed she could be coming to apologize when she kept hammering on my door and demanding that I solve this because I had ruined everything. She wasn't, to give you a hint. She began yelling at me the moment I opened the door, accusing me of ruining her life and causing everything to fall apart. She even accused me of being the reason her fiancé's parents were re-evaluating the wedding since they believed she was immature. She really lost it when I tried to clarify that she was the one who had locked me in a basement and that none of this was my fault. When Emily noticed the framed ultrasound picture I placed on the coffee table, she barged into my living room, ripped the frame off, and then tore the ultrasounds to pieces. After everything that had transpired, I couldn't believe she would do anything so heinous, and I was paralyzed. She yelled that she wished I lost the baby so she could regain her life before she walked out, but my husband was furious and told her to go. Her level of anger was unprecedented, and it frightened me. I just started crying after she went. For hours, I was unable to stop crying. Everything seemed to have happened at once. Being imprisoned in the basement, nearly losing the baby, and then discovering that my sister's malice knew no bounds. I couldn't comprehend how someone could wish that on their own family, so I kept repeating what she had said in my mind. To be honest, I'm not sure if I can dispute my husband's desire to cut off any communication with her right away. Even though I know I should cut her off, I still feel bad about it, as if I'm somehow at fault for everything. Emily is simply in a horrible place, according to my mom, and I should attempt to forgive her. However, how can you forgive someone who wishes harm on your child? Emily's fiancé contacted me personally, which further complicated matters. He stated he's been having a lot of trouble with Emily's unpredictable conduct and expressed regret for her actions during the party. He said he's beginning to see a side of her that he didn't know existed, and he's not sure if he can still go through with the wedding. I was unsure of how to respond to him. I'm stuck in the middle of their relationship turmoil, which is upsetting because I never wanted to be involved. Right now, I'm unsure of what to do. For the sake of my mother, I have mixed feelings about forgiving Emily, but I'm also afraid she'll continue to harm me. I'm not sure whether she can change. I don't want to be preoccupied with worrying about what she's going to do next during my pregnancy. Right now, my baby and my health are my top priorities. We're just attempting to minimize the stress, and my spouse has been tremendously supportive. However, it still feels like things with Emily are far from over. She won't go down without creating more drama since you know her. If anything else comes up, I'll keep everyone updated. I'm not holding my breath, but right now I'm just hoping for a little calm. Second update. Hello, I haven't updated on this site in a month, but I've been so busy. I thought I'd give you all an update since a lot has happened and I've finally had some spare time. Now let me start where I left off. I was distraught for a week after Emily tore my ultrasounds and ran gone. I assume that Emily's fiancé contacted me because he was hesitant to marry her after she told him about what she had done. They had apparently started fighting frequently. Her fiancé contacted me to tell me what had transpired. He apparently attempted to reassure her that since the two of them had saved up more than enough money, they wouldn't require my parents' money to carry out the wedding. My sister, however, would not listen. She was determined to destroy my life in the same manner that I had allegedly destroyed hers. She would talk about how she could get even with me all day and all night. Her fiancé was frightened. When it finally got to him, he told her that he was going to be leaving. He even accused her of being insane and said that she was the only reason he was unable to stay. My sibling was a complete mess. She kept threatening me over the phone and text, accusing me of destroying her life once more. I blocked her number after ignoring it until I could stand it no more. She was not deterred by that. She started sending me targeted texts on my husband's phone. She even questioned him about how he could tolerate being married to me since, in her opinion, I just had my own interest in mind. She also insulted my unborn child without holding back. I really wanted to call her and scream at her, but I realized it would only make things worse for both me and my child. Therefore, I also had my husband block her number. For a few days, everything was quiet until my mother called. My mother informed me that my sister had visited her home the previous day. Emily was sobbing uncontrollably and was hysterical. During her engagement, she would not stop talking about how I should remain quiet about my pregnancy. She went on and on about how my very existence had destroyed every part of her life. She claims that because I always seem to get the best of everything, she has had to make many compromises. Given how many of my special events I had to forfeit so she could have her time in the spotlight, I'm not sure where she got the idea. In any case, my mom was struck with insight after hearing my sister vent about how I was to blame for all of her negative experiences. She became aware of Emily's irrational and entitled behavior. I suppose my mother had a real look into my sister's thoughts, and nothing supported her theory that Emily was simply having a rough day. My mother finally had enough of Emily's tirade and confronted her about her insane behavior. That did not sit well with my sister. It worsened her breakdown, if anything. She was even more irate because the only person she believed to be on her side had turned against her. Emily apparently hurried upstairs to my former bedroom after getting up from the couch where they were conversing. Then she started destroying my room. She tore up all my certificates, smashed every trophy I had ever earned, and hurled items off the shelves. My mom was pretty upset about that. When my sister and I moved out, my mom, who is quite nostalgic, made sure to leave our bedrooms exactly as they were, clean only. She was reminded by our rooms that we will always be connected in some way. It was like Emily erasing all of my mom's best memories at once when she tore my room apart. My mother was enraged and heartbroken. She shouted at Emily to get out. Amazingly, my sister grinned at my mother's rage before leaving. Yes, at the moment, my mother isn't a huge fan of Emily. She then called me to express her regret for always defending my sister's actions. She assured me that since Emily's actions were so heinous, I had every right to feel the way I did. To be honest, I never imagined that my mother would genuinely realize how awful Emily was. It was shocking to hear her apologize. However, I felt thankful because I became acutely aware of how much guilt I had been released from. My mother supporting me and not pressuring me to maintain harmony with Emily made me feel so much better. My parents have informed Emily that they no longer communicate with her. Despite my best efforts to support her, my mom has been inconsolable. I spent a lot of time with my hubby assisting my parents in reassembling my room. My dad has stated on multiple occasions that he does not want to see Emily for a long time and is officially furious with her. Emily's fiancé had finally broken up with her by the time I last spoke with him. He broke the lease on their flat, which cost him a lot of money, but he's happier today. I have no idea where Emily is, and to be quite honest, I don't give a damn about her whereabouts or activities. All I want is for her to live far away from me, at least until I give birth. That's all for now. At this moment, I don't believe anything more dramatic could occur, but I suppose only time will tell. I hope that I will only return to provide another update after giving delivery. I want to thank everyone who has read my posts and sent me well wishes until then. Third update. I've returned with what I hope will be the last update, everyone. Despite the crazy circumstances, I'm pleased to announce that I've given birth to a gorgeous, healthy boy. He brightens our days, and to be honest, having him here has helped us see things more clearly. Naturally, though, Emily couldn't let me enjoy this moment without causing a final piece of mayhem. It was unusually quiet for the first several weeks after my birth. When Emily remained distant, I had the hope that she would finally stop bothering me. For the first time in months, my husband and I felt as though we could breathe as we adapted to life with a newborn. My folks had been amazing. My mom even brought over meals to help out, and they kept us updated on a daily basis. It was quiet, and I was really relieved. Especially because my parents had taken care to keep Emily and the trouble she had caused us out of the conversation. However, my mom noted in passing that Emily had been inquiring about the baby a lot during one of their trips. Emily apparently wanted to find out when she could visit my son. Even though my mom was wary since she was aware of Emily's instability, she still felt bad about excluding Emily. However, my dad was adamantly opposed to Emily getting close to us. Neither he nor I had any faith in her. I promised my mother I would give it some thought though, because I didn't want to cause any more drama. A week later, I received a text message from an unknown sender. I read the message and instantly recognized the sender, Emily, even if the number was unknown. There were several insults in the message. She referred to me as a self-centered jerk who was attempting to remove herself from the family by having a child first. It should have been her with the first grandchild, she insisted, and my kid didn't deserve the life I was providing him. I was taken aback. Even after all this time, her jealousy and bitterness remained strong. The last straw was a panicked call from my husband's mother one morning. I was an unfit mother, according to a letter, yes, a real letter, that someone had written her. It contained numerous falsehoods, including claims that I was mentally disturbed, that I was ignoring my child, and even a veiled suggestion that I was abusive. I had my mother-in-law give me a photo of the anonymous letter. It turned out to be Emily's handwriting. My dear mother-in-law was appalled that someone who knew my husband and me well enough could be so explicit in their criticisms against us, even if she didn't believe a word in the letter. She was likewise appalled by the charges and concerned that we might be the target of someone. That was it for me. I was at my breaking point. Emily had gone too far, and I couldn't let her continue to have an impact on my family and my life. My spouse and I decided to return to his home state after talking it over. Although we had discussed it previously, it seemed like the only real way to get out of her madness this time. To ensure Emily would have no way of finding us, we took care to keep the location of our move in his hometown a secret from as many people as possible. We packed up our home and made the major move over the course of the following few weeks. Despite the fact that we would no longer be close to them, my parents supported our choice. My mom was devastated that our relationship had devolved to this point, and my dad was still upset with Emily, but they recognized that we had to act in our sons' and our own best interests. Emily, meantime, is finally having to deal with some repercussions. She reportedly started stalking and harassing her ex-fiancé over the phone and in person after he broke up with her. She nearly immediately broke the restraining order he had issued against her. She is currently coping with the legal fallout from that. At this point, my parents have essentially stopped communicating with her, and I must admit that I'm relieved. I'm fine with the fact that I don't know where she is right now. I'm not supposed to fix her, but she needs help. Life has been so much better after the transfer. Surrounded by his family, who have been nothing but encouraging, my husband and I are getting settled in our new house. Without the constant drama Emily brought into our life, I feel like we can now concentrate on raising our baby in a peaceful, caring setting. I cannot say that I will ever completely comprehend Emily's actions, but I've accepted that she is no longer in my life, and that's all right. My child, my marriage, and my peace must all be safeguarded. I had that peace for the first time in what seems like forever. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who has followed along on this crazy adventure. You have no idea how much your support has meant to me, and I'm delighted to report a happy conclusion. Now to the next story, story 2. My parents gave me some money and kicked me out after my sister was born. 17 years later, they want my help. I am 35 years old and employed as a software developer at a large West Coast tech company. I finally established a secure existence for myself after working in the field for almost 10 years, complete with a respectable salary, a cozy apartment, and even some future investments. I undoubtedly appear to be living the American dream from the outside. However, something that happened recently has been making me face my history, and I'm finding it difficult to deal with. After 17 years of total quiet, my parents, 60 million and 58 million, reached out to me and asked for my assistance with my sister, 13 million. You must be aware of our past in order to comprehend the significance of this. My parents never wanted me as a youngster. Before I was born, they had been trying for a daughter for years, and they were openly disappointed to have me instead. As a child, I frequently heard parents call me the spare, or a remnant in conversations with friends or family. We weren't impoverished because my dad was a real estate agent and my mom taught high school, but they always pretended that my presence was depleting their finances. I can still clearly recall family get-togethers where family members would try to persuade my parents to be thankful for their healthy son. I learned to keep quiet during these conversations, but my parents would still say things like, "Unless it's a girl, we don't really have a child yet." My aunt would say things like, "At least he's smart and well-behaved," or, "Many couples can't have children at all." Their remarks still had a profound impact, especially during family gatherings or holidays. I began to develop a strong interest in computers and programming in middle school. Using whatever resources I could find online, I would spend hours training myself to code in the school computer lab. After noticing my enthusiasm, my computer science teacher began to mentor me and even allowed me to stay after school to work on projects. However, my parents would either nod absently or shift the conversation to their ongoing efforts to have another child whenever I tried to discuss my accomplishments with them. When I was 15, everything changed. My sister was my parents' miracle child, finally born after years of trying. It was like a switch flipping in our home when she was born. There was love, excitement, and celebration all at once, but none of it was aimed at me. They gave her everything, including their time, money, love, and attention. Although I recognized that she was their top priority, the disparity in their treatment of us was unpleasant and striking. I can still clearly recall my junior year victory in a state-level programming competition. A minor college scholarship was part of the award. My parents were so enamored with my sister's block stacking that they hardly looked up when I brought the trophy and certificate home. However, her accomplishment of stacking 3 blocks on top of one another was worthy of a cake and photo celebration with the family. I pushed myself into my academics and coding at school because I knew that education was the key to my freedom. I began working as a freelance web developer on the side, keeping the money I made hidden because I thought I might need it in the future. That intuition was correct. In retrospect, I believe my parents had been preparing this for some time since, rather than throwing a party for my 18th birthday, they sat me down for what they called an important discussion. They clarified that my sister's playroom and learning area required my room. They had already made the decision that I would go right away. They completely shut me down when I attempted to explain that I needed time to find a place and save money. They said I'd had time to get ready and should be able to handle things myself. My father gave me a $500 envelope containing what he referred to as startup money, and gave me until the weekend to depart. It happened on a Tuesday. I stuffed my laptop, some clothes, and the about $3,000 I had surreptitiously collected from my freelancing business into my old high school backpack and a few trash bags. As I packed, my sister, who was only 3 years old at the time, watched from the doorway, unable to comprehend what was going on. The initial years were harsh. While being cautious not to overstay my welcome anywhere, I couch-surfed between friends' homes. I worked a variety of jobs, including day labor at construction sites, nighttime shifts at 7-Eleven, and freelance coding whenever I could find customers. In between employment, I would spend the day sleeping at public libraries, utilizing their computers to learn new programming languages and search for better prospects. I survived on whatever was on offer at the dollar store and ramen noodles. I sometimes went to bed hungry because I wasn't sure if I would have enough money for my next meal. The worst time of year was in the winter, when I occasionally had to decide between having enough food to eat and paying for a warm place to sleep. I made an effort to stay in touch with my parents during those formative years in spite of everything. I would periodically give them a call in the hopes of seeing even the slightest indication that they were concerned about my welfare. However, they were obviously waiting for the conversation to end, and each exchange was brief and awkward. They never inquired about my needs or how I was doing. They just remarked, "That's nice," and shifted the conversation to my sister's preschool accomplishments when I told that I was enrolled in community college courses while working. I quit trying after being the only one who reached out for 2 years. Even after I taught myself full-stack coding, they never gave me a call to see how I was doing or left a message on my birthday or on holidays. I recall being so desperate to let them know that I had arrived, but their phone had already been cut off. I learned so much about survival and independence in those first several years after being expelled. I continued to code while working several jobs. I would use my phone to study programming documentation during my breaks at the convenience shop. I would work on minor freelance assignments at the public library in between building site shifts. With free Wi-Fi, air conditioning, and, most importantly, computers where I could practice coding, the library turned into my haven. When a small firm decided to hire me as a junior developer, I finally got my break. My freelance work portfolio and my contributions to open source projects impressed them. Although the pay wasn't high by IT standards, it changed my life. I was able to buy a little studio apartment for the first time and was no longer concerned about where I would sleep every night. I pushed myself into the task, working 70-hour weeks and learning as much as I could about cloud computing, database administration, and system architecture. Like a sponge, I took it all in. After my coworkers saw how committed I was, I quickly took charge of modest initiatives. I kept working on open source projects and creating my own apps on the weekends and at night. I had discovered something I genuinely liked doing, so it wasn't just about the money anymore. When one of the big IT corporations saw my contributions to their open source platform, it was the true turning point. They extended an invitation for an interview, And following 6 rounds of technical interviews, I was offered a job that fundamentally altered my life. After 7 years, I am now in charge of a large project team as a senior software engineer. I have enough cash to feel secure about the future, a modern apartment in a safe building, and a solid investment portfolio. Before my father's number showed up on my phone 3 days ago, after 17 years of total silence, I believed I had finally put an end to my past. It was startling to hear his voice. His voice seemed older, almost frantic. It couldn't wait, he added. They had to discuss my sister. I was left reeling by the discourse that ensued. It looks like my 13-year-old sister is having a lot of problems. She frequently skips school, has been caught shoplifting several times, and hangs out with a group of older teens whom my parents disapprove of. More concerningly, she has had multiple encounters with local police authorities and drugs have been discovered in her room twice. 3 different rehabilitation programs have already been tried on her, but none of them appear to have been successful. When my father mentioned their financial predicament, it became evident why they had called. More than $200,000 has been spent on counseling sessions, various treatment programs, and legal bills. They had sold the majority of their valuables, maxed out many credit cards, and remortgaged their home. They are in dire need of assistance and are now considering a $75,000 specialist long-term treatment center. With tears in her eyes, my mother called and said they had nowhere else to go. The phrase, "family needs to stick together," and the fact that I am their only chance to save my sister were repeated by her. I was struck by the irony of hearing these remarks from the same folks who expelled me when I was 18 and never looked back. When I was sleeping in my car in between couch surfing arrangements, where was this sense of family unity? On all those evenings when I went to bed hungry, where was it? In addition to aid with their credit card debt and mortgage payments, they are requesting support with the costs of the treatment program. They require over $100,000 in total. If I couldn't give the entire money right away, my father even recommended that we arrange a payment schedule. To be honest, if I wanted to, I could assist them. I have a secure financial situation thanks to years of frugal living and wise investing. However, I feel physically uncomfortable at the idea of granting them access to my finances. I acquired this money by working hard and making sacrifices for years, frequently going without food and housing while learning to code. I can't sleep at night because of how complicated this scenario is. Since my sister is only a child, I feel bad for even considering helping. She never requested to be born into this mess, and perhaps things would have turned out differently if someone had supported me when I was a teenager. However, I then recall how my parents handled me, how they dismissed me without question and never once inquired about my whereabouts for 17 years. They contacted again yesterday, requesting a face-to-face meeting. They claimed to want to make amends and provide an explanation for everything. They offered to drive the 4 hours to visit me and proposed that we meet at a fancy restaurant in my neighborhood. Their zeal unnerves me in some way, as if they're making an excessive effort to sway events to their advantage. According to my partner, 34F, I should set clear limits. She has personally witnessed the amount of effort I have put into rebuilding my life and getting over my childhood trauma. She fears that allowing my parents to return could reverse years of emotional growth. Although he thinks I owe my parents nothing, my best buddy, who let me sleep on his sofa during those difficult early years, advises me to think about assisting my sister directly if I so choose. I'm totally conflicted right now. My rational side tells me to keep the distance that has helped me succeed. My parents still view me as a resource to be utilized rather than a beloved son, thus they haven't changed. Their true motivations are evident from the way they are handling this matter, concentrating on the money rather than trying to make atonement for the past. However, my emotional side keeps thinking about my sister, a disturbed adolescent who may be misbehaving due to the same poisonous familial dynamics from which I fled. By refusing to assist, am I sustaining the abandoning cycle, or would aiding merely make my parents' manipulation possible? Those terrifying evenings spent sleeping in my car taught me to never take for granted the life I've worked so hard to create. I feel like I'm being pulled back into the craziness that I've been trying to avoid for years. Should I assist them and run the danger of being manipulated again? Do I make an effort to assist my sister directly? Or should I continue to set the boundaries that have helped me recover and grow? I'm sure I'll question any decision I choose. I might be angry with them for dragging me back in if I assist. I could always question whether I could have changed my sister's life if I didn't. This decision is weighing me down, and I could really use some outside insight. First update. I chose to meet my folks at a downtown coffee shop after reading your advice and comments. I reasoned that being in a public setting would help maintain decorum and provide me with a convenient way to leave if necessary. I was immediately struck by how much they had aged when I first saw them enter. In addition to having black circles under their eyes and a lot more gray hair than I could recall, they were worn out. They didn't take long to delve into specifics. It seems that my sister's problems are more serious than they first said over the phone. She has had to attend several rehabilitation programs, all of which they have had to pay for out of pocket, in addition to her substance abuse and legal issues. She hasn't gone to a full week of classes in months, so she's not just missing school periodically. She frequently slips out with individuals who are obviously a bad influence, frequently going missing for days at a time. My parents weren't lying to me about their financial circumstances. They showed me their phone records. To pay for these costs, they have sold the majority of their prized assets, including the house I grew up in. They are currently having financial difficulties and live in a tiny apartment. According to their estimates, they will only be able to survive for a few more months if they sell some family artifacts. I felt uneasy because of this underlying expectation that pervaded our talk. My duty as their son, to assist them, was one of the family obligations they constantly bringing up. They seem to assume that just because we are related, I would step up regardless of what they had done in the past. It was evident from the way they spoke that they hadn't really acknowledged their previous treatment or truly digested how they had wronged me. I could feel all of my previous hatred and rage rising as they continued. None of this was their fault, in their opinion. They dismissed my expulsion at the age of 18, claiming it was just parenting, and that they had acted in the best interests of the family, at the time. They behaved as though their treatment of me was entirely appropriate. They now expected me to overlook everything and intervene to solve their issues. I came to see that they were seeking a solution, not understanding or forgiveness. And my money was that solution to them. I was their final option because they needed someone to shoulder the financial load of all the choices they had made over the years. I listened to what they had to say before firmly telling them that I was unable to assist them. I clarified that when they abandoned me, I had put a lot of effort into starting a life on my own and that I was no longer in a position to help them, either morally or emotionally. I was clear that I didn't feel obligated to get them out of a situation that they had established for themselves. My refusal was not well received by them at all. Their tone altered entirely, and their expressions hardened. They accused me of being callous for not assisting my sister, branded me selfish, and claimed that I was leaving my family. Their eyes were filled with disappointment and rage, which I could see. It reminded me of my early years. Nothing had changed. They continued attempting to use guilt to make me feel as though I owed them money. I was more conflicted as I left that meeting than when I arrived. I feel somewhat relieved that I defended myself and established boundaries. However, another part of me feels bad, as if I'm abandoning them when they're at their lowest. It's difficult to describe, but it seems weird to leave them in this way even if I know they profoundly wounded me. I can't stop thinking about my sister, whom I don't even know, and their predicament. Although I'm sorry for her, I don't think I can help her. It hurts to know that even after all these years, my parents still only regard me as a tool to solve their problems rather than as a unique person with a life and challenges of my own. It's difficult for me to let go of the guilt. Is it wrong of me to persist with my choice? Should I have looked for a compromise? I can't stop reliving the encounter in my head, questioning whether I made the proper decision. Second update. Since my last post, which was only a week ago, things have gotten even more bizarre. Only a few hours earlier, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I heard my sister's voice for the first time when I responded. I was completely unprepared for this. I only have hazy memories of her from when she was a newborn, just before I moved out. The call got off to an unexpectedly good start. Considering what I had heard about her behavior, I was surprised to hear a courteous, almost pleasant voice. She started by requesting that I assist our parents with their present financial predicament. It was evident that she had practiced this pitch because she was making a big deal out of how they were having trouble and how I could save the family. I made an effort to respond politely but firmly, stating that I had to make the best choices for myself because of the complexity of my connection with our parents. Everything changed at that point. Her attitude changed abruptly. In a matter of seconds, she switched from being courteous to becoming enraged, accusing me of being self-centered and leaving her to handle our parents' problems. She had always been envious of her and insisted that I was abandoning my family. She said I was being arrogant since I had left and begun living on my own, whereas they had been my backers the entire time. I was stunned by what she said. They had a hauntingly familiar sound, as if she were repeating something she had heard countless times. She talked about my assistance with such arrogance, as though she really thought I had a duty to intervene and make everything right. I was so shocked that I was unable to react. I was being forced to make up for years of decisions I had nothing to do with by this person I had never dated. She hung up before I had a chance to comprehend her emotional outburst. I tried to make sense of everything as I sat there looking at my phone. What was the source of this animosity? Why did she believe I had left her? I required clarification. I was determined to find out what was happening, so I called my folks. I immediately questioned them whether they had been telling my sister that I had left them and her behind when they first picked up the phone. After a revealing silence, they eventually came clean. They had been giving my sister an entirely distorted explanation for my departure for years. They informed her that they had severed their relationship with her out of spite and that I couldn't bear to share their attention with a younger sibling. I was portrayed as a conceited older brother who left the family because I was envious of her. They had completely removed from their story the fact that they had made me feel alienated from the day she was born and expelled me as soon as I became 18. It was as if someone had taken my breath away. My sister has grown up thinking that I was the bad guy in this tale. Given that she had been fed misinformation about who I was and why I left, it's no wonder she felt as though I had abandoned her. She had been carefully kept in the dark about the fact that my parents had made me feel unwelcome from birth and had evicted me from the house. That realization caused me to hang up on them. Although it has just been a few hours since our previous talk, they haven't made another attempt to get in touch. I'm upset with my parents for misrepresenting me to my sister and giving her the impression that I abandoned her, but I'm also upset with my sister for snapping at me and demanding my assistance as though I owed it to her. It's difficult to get rid of this resentment, but I'm also experiencing a new form of guilt. I wish my parents had been honest with her about my reasons for leaving. Perhaps my relationship with my sister would have been different if they had. Although I might not have been able to provide financial support to my parents, I could have developed a relationship with my sister and perhaps helped her steer clear of some of these behavioral problems. Now, though, it seems impossible to repair the harm. Even whether I want to try is up in the air. My family returned in the worst conceivable way, just when I thought I was done with them forever, which makes the whole scenario tiring. It's not that easy for me, even if a lot of commenters have advised me to simply ban my parents and move on. Whatever you want to call me, this is still family, and I believe that I should at least be aware of what's happening. Even though I'm in no position to provide financial support for my family, I can't help but notice that this is the first time they've contacted me. Nevertheless, I can see that my sister is too engrossed in their version of events to see things any other way, and my parents are still attempting to control the situation to achieve their goals. I'm at a loss on what to do. I can't get rid of the sense that any decision I make will be the wrong one. I'm even more convinced that keeping my distance is the proper decision after the way they've misrepresented the reasons for my departure. I feel bad for my sister though. Her conduct and relationships are obviously being impacted by the skewed perspective of her family history that she was raised with. I wonder if this damage can be fixed or if it's best to leave it alone. Third update. Since my last update, which was a few months ago, I've had plenty of time to think things through and let things calm down. It's been quieter for me, to be honest, but only because I choose to avoid the mess my sister and parents had produced. I'm coming to realize that sometimes taking a step back and avoiding letting their drama take over my life is the greatest way to achieve serenity. My parents gave me another call about a month after I had last provided an update. I wanted to hear what they had to say, so even though I was dreading it, I picked up. They were even more desperate this time, and they accused me of being dishonest in order to get money from me. They described the dreadful situation, how they were in danger of losing everything, and how they wanted me to intervene and make things right. The guilt trip about family is supposed to stick together was their first attempt. When that failed, they resorted to threats, claiming that if I didn't assist them, they would ruin my life. They then claimed that I was their only hope, changing their strategy once more. To be honest, I felt disgusted. They continued to threaten me in spite of everything that had transpired, and they never once stopped to admit how poorly they had treated me. I refused to back down and reiterated that I was unable to provide them with financial support and that I was not responsible for solving their issues. I reminded them that I wasn't responsible for cleaning up the mess. They had made these decisions. Of course, that did not make them pleased. For the next month, they continued to phone, alternating between threats and guilt trips. They eventually stopped phoning. I assumed they had finally come to the conclusion that I would not give in. I didn't hear back from them for a month, and to be honest, I thought that might be it. However, I received another call around a week ago. I nearly didn't answer, but my curiosity won out. Things had only deteriorated. They informed me that they needed to file for bankruptcy. They were essentially starting over with nothing after selling nearly all they owned to pay off their debts. They then revealed even more shocking detail. My sister had moved in with one of her friends and had severed all ties with them. Even though she is just 13, she managed to move in with a friend's family, who my parents claim tolerates her misbehavior. They said it was best that my sister left them because they could no longer see themselves supporting her when I questioned why they didn't call the police. In a sense, they have also abandoned their second child. They initially attempted to place the blame on me. They claimed that none of this would have occurred if I had simply assisted them when they requested it. They said that everything went south because of me. Naturally, they were unable to acknowledge their own responsibility for their acts. I was furious. I bluntly told them that their actions and how they had treated me were to blame for everything that was happening to them. I brought up the topics of how they treated me like a second-class person in my own house, how they neglected me when I needed them, and how they expelled me when I reached 18. I informed them that they continued to try to place the responsibility on me while ignoring the fact that that had an impact on me. At that point, they began to retreat and eventually ceased making excuses. They expressed regret for everything they had done to me and offered an apology. They expressed to me their wish that they had acted differently. They seemed to be saying everything that needed to be said, but it was too late. In addition to the fact that they had ruined my sister's and my own lives, I couldn't simply ignore how they had treated me for years. They were now suffering the repercussions of their decision to push me away. I must admit that I felt sorry for them, but I also realized that I couldn't risk the life I had created for myself in an attempt to mend what was already damaged. I informed them that I needed to keep my distance and that I was unable to assist. Despite their displeasure, I stood by my choice. I was still upset with them for what they had done to me after I hung up. However, I felt sorry for them at the same time. It's too late now, but I wish they had taken the time to realize what they were doing incorrectly when they had the chance. I've come to terms with the fact that I can't save them, and I'm learning to accept that. I have no idea what the future holds for my sister or them. I just know that I won't let their errors disturb my tranquility. They can't drag me back into their mess. I've come too far. I have much more important things to worry about right now, but maybe in the future I'll try to get in touch with my sister once more to see if I can assist her get back on track. All I can do is hope she takes this lesson to heart and makes wiser decisions than our parents did. That's about it for me, then. I won't be checking in on my family for a very long time. Even though I'm aware that this isn't the best conclusion, I've come to terms with it. I sincerely appreciate all of your guidance and encouragement over this trip. It has enabled me to remain steadfast in my choices. Now to the next story, Story 3. My parents favored my twin sister. So much that they spent my wedding budget on her, so I cut them off after refusing my mother's selfish request. I, 23F, have a twin sister named Allison with whom I am not on good terms. I'm not even on speaking terms with her or my parents. Despite how I've been treated in the past, we used to be on good terms, but I've kept my distance for the last 2 years. They hadn't bothered to contact me either, until recently. Allison is 12 minutes older than me and is therefore the golden kid by default. My parents only wanted one child because that was what they had planned for, and they didn't have the resources to support two. By the time they discovered it was twins, it was too late, and my mother did not want to take any chances. In high school, I learned about this from my intoxicated uncle at a Thanksgiving celebration. That was pretty much the day I gave up trying to win my folks over. They did what seemed most natural in those circumstances. They had 2 children but chose to adore only one. That was Allison, not me. Allison and I had an incredible sibling rivalry from childhood. To impress our parents, I would try to outdo all she could do. But the more I achieved, the more they appeared to despise me for outperforming their golden child. To be honest, Allison had no interest in competing with me. She was only looking for validation. She claimed to be concerned about the rivalry, but her main skill was manipulation. She was brilliant at convincing people that she was offended when I outdid her. This resulted in many, including our parents, relatives, and even some classmates, supporting her feelings while tearing me down to help her feel better. Finally, the competition provided me with good grades and several extracurricular accomplishments to demonstrate my superiority. Meanwhile, Allison captured my parents' attention, affirmation, and sympathy. I was always cast as the villain, making her feel inadequate. Looking back, I don't think I'd swap what I've achieved, but I wish I had rubbed my success in her face more at the time. 2 years ago, we turned 21. By then, we'd both graduated. Allison from a conventional college and me from one of the state's best business schools. I was the valedictorian and received a scholarship, so my parents saved a lot of money on my education. Call me crazy, but I honestly believed my parents would be proud of me. They were not. Instead, they concentrated solely on Allison and her troubles. Allison had barely made ends meet and was looking for work, only to be turned down again. I, on the other hand, was already working from home as an intern for a corporation. Despite my accomplishments, my parents did not bother to congratulate me. Instead, they were absorbed with concern for Allison's future. I was not surprised, but rather disappointed. I was still living with my parents and hadn't saved enough money to move out, so I chose to keep my feelings to myself. But after our 21st birthday, I couldn't anymore. I expected them to accomplish something significant for us. However, the day before our birthday, I learned that everyone had left me at home alone. All they left me was a note saying they were going to the beach with Allison and her friends and would be back in a few days. I vividly recall being completely devastated when I read that note. They had taken Allison and her pals on a beach trip, but all I received was a happy birthday card and a $50 gift card. Many aspects of my childhood had been unfair, but here was where I drew the line. It was so disheartening and callous that I decided to leave that day and never look back. I had a few friends who were ready to let me stay with them until I could find and afford my own place. It wouldn't take long because the firm where I was interning was likely to recruit me full-time once the internship concluded. I only needed a place to reside for 2 months at the most. I packed my belongings and moved in with a friend without informing my parents or sister, and I have not looked back since. They didn't miss me enough to want me to come back. They did phone me on my birthday, the day after I moved out, but not to wish me. They said they'd be returning shortly and recommended I hire a plumber to fix the tap. I informed them that I was no longer living at home and had moved out, hoping that this information would elicit a response from them. But no such luck. My folks seemed fine with it, and Allison didn't mind. That was it. That was my final proper conversation with my family. Since then, I haven't seen them or heard from them again. My friends occasionally told me about Allison, which kept me up to date on her life, but that was about it. They knew nothing about my parents, and my parents knew nothing about me. I've worked hard for the past 2 years and finally got my own place. It's hardly a mansion, but it's a lovely apartment in a desirable neighborhood. The rent is reasonable for my wage, which is fantastic because most people my age haven't been able to accomplish this as quickly. I'm pleased with how my life has turned out, and I've done my best to keep my family out of my thoughts. Allison recently married a businessman nearly 10 years older than her and is now living it out in California. I thought everything was fine in my family until 2 days ago, when I received a call from my uncle. He told me I needed to come visit my parents right away because they had been in a terrible car accident and wanted to see me. I went to the hospital as soon as possible since, of course, I'm not so heartless. When I arrived, I discovered that they had already been in the hospital for a few days and were recovering from their injuries. A truck had hit their car. They had survived, but with significant injuries. They didn't have health insurance because my father had always believed that if we looked after ourselves, we wouldn't need to go to the hospital. This was by far one of the most ridiculous opinions I've ever heard. My parents immediately phoned my sister, but she informed them that she would not return or assist them. Apparently, it was tacky of our parents to seek financial assistance from her wealthy husband so soon after their marriage. She did not want her spouse to think she was a gold digger. She also didn't want to travel back since she couldn't leave her home and 2 children, who weren't even her own. They were her husband's children from a previous marriage, but she was too preoccupied with playing happy family with her husband's family to see her own parents in the hospital following a tragic automobile accident. She couldn't have helped, even if she had wanted to. Without her husband's assistance, she would not have been able to purchase even the flight tickets back home. After all, she's now a stay-at-home parent, caring for children who aren't her own. So much for being the favorite daughter and golden child. I couldn't believe they didn't even call me first. It became even more irritating when my uncle informed me that my parents now expected me to finance their medical expenditures. It's a large sum of money, and if I agreed, I'd have a difficult time recovering financially. I don't want to spend so much money, especially on people who have never cared about me or shown me love throughout my life. I know they have other family members that can care for them. Even if I don't pay, somebody else will. However, my parents appear to be more worried with the shame of begging others for money. They warned me that borrowing money from others would be more humiliating than borrowing from me because they'd have to repay it sooner than I would. That is what they said when they asked me to pay their debts. They even assured that I would receive my money back quickly. I do not know what to do. I'm in a bad situation. I can either disgrace my parents by refusing to pay their medical bills and focusing on myself, or I may pay for them, lose my money, and then wait indefinitely for them to repay it. To be completely honest, I don't want to help them at all. We haven't spoken in 2 years, and I've had a horrible relationship with my family for as long as I can remember. They're like strangers to me now, so I don't feel inclined to assist them. But if I don't help, am I no better than Allison? That would be difficult to accept. Is it wrong of me not to want to help my parents pay their hospital costs after such a tragic accident? Update number 1. Hello there, I've decided not to aid my parents. It was a difficult decision to make, but I was confident that their bills would be handled by someone else. They have nothing to worry about. They just contacted me because they didn't want to ask their other relatives. They were overly egoistic. I haven't told them about my decision yet. How do you tell your family that you're not going to help your parents pay for their medical bills after such a tragic accident? It's been nearly 5 days since I met them. After reading the comments, I realized I was still subconsciously competing with Allison. Because she didn't help our parents, I felt compelled to step up and prove that I was the better daughter, or whatever. I guess I'll never be able to get rid of that competitive streak, no matter how hard I try. It's simply who I am now. The majority of the comments criticized my parents' lack of health insurance, and I agree. It was quite silly of my father to discourage it. If I had been a part of their lives, I would have ensured they were insured. He didn't even have his automobile insured since he believed he was such a good driver. They're happy the collision was caused by the truck driver, since else they'd have had to pay for the auto repairs themselves. As for my parents' financial position, which many of you have inquired about, I would say they are fine. They are neither rich nor poor. My father is the head of sales at his company, while my mother works in human resources at a smaller firm. Their combined salary is sufficient to allow them to live well, especially since they are no longer responsible for supporting me or Allison. Allison and I did not have to worry about money growing up, but we also couldn't afford to live extravagantly. We were middle class, and my parents still are. I don't see why they can't pay their own medical bills. If they can borrow money and promise to repay it eventually, they will undoubtedly be able to pay their own debts. They haven't provided me a clear explanation for why they can't, and I doubt I will ever find out. Update number 2. I told my parents that I would not fund their bills. They had been contacting me for the previous week, and yesterday I knew I couldn't just ignore them and wait till they were released from the hospital. So I answered their calls and told them I'd thought about it and didn't feel compelled to help. As expected, they did not take it well. My mother tore into me, shrieking as loudly as she could with her broken ribs. She called me ungrateful and used the usual slurs. My father, on the other hand, just told me that I was no longer his daughter and hung up once my mother had finished yelling. It didn't hurt like I expected. Honestly, it had been a long time since I felt like their daughter. I can't recall when I last felt loved by my parents. They hadn't spoken to me in 2 years, on purpose, because I moved out after they snubbed me on a significant birthday. In many ways, I had never truly had parents. I'm just going to keep living my life as I have for the last 2 years, and maybe even before that. This decision has little impact on me, despite my parents' expectations. Unfortunately, after my talk with my parents, my uncle called to give me another earful. I hung up after a few seconds because I didn't want this from him either. They can think anything they want about me. It doesn't matter anymore. Later, my uncle texted me to let me know that my parents might still ask other family members for money. He also indicated that my parents had decided to use the wedding fund they had put up for me and Allison. They had already spent more than half of it on Allison's wedding, and what remained was squandered on a trip to Europe. That's why they had almost little savings left and couldn't meet their medical bills. So, the riddle is solved. Of course, my uncle told me all of this to make me feel terrible, but all I felt was relief that I hadn't wasted my hard-earned money on their expenses. They had carelessly wasted their own cash, which was not my fault. It was not my responsibility that they did not have insurance owing to their erroneous ideas. They could beg money from family or go to hell, but I was not going to give them anything. They were no longer entitled to anything from me, including my time and money. Update number 3. Hey, something pretty strange happened today, and I need to get it off my chest. I haven't been able to inform my friends about what has been going on, because most of the people I know have only known me for a short time. I don't think I want to share anything about my family history with these people, so Reddit is all I have. It's been about 2 weeks since I last spoke with my folks. Allison showed up at my apartment a few hours ago, around the evening. Her unexpected visit astonished me, first and foremost because I did not expect her to know where I lived. Apparently, one of our high school friends told her about the neighborhood where I lived, and she asked around to find out exactly where I was. That is a lot of effort for her to do simply to meet me, of all people. She looked and acted far differently than I remembered. She's gotten more polished and sophisticated, which is a significant change from the way she used to speak in high school. Now she sounds more ladylike and behaves better. Her fashion sense has evolved, as has her jewelry, and her makeup appears more sophisticated. It felt as if I wasn't even speaking to Allison. But one thing has not changed: who she is as a person. I guess you can't put cosmetics on your heart and instruct people to name it Mrs. Davis, as she did to herself. Her personality and ideas have undoubtedly not changed. She knocked on my door, and I let her in. I was startled to see her, but also interested as to why she had stopped by. I decided to hear her out. After some small conversation about her life, in which she unpromptedly told me everything she'd been up to and boasted about how wonderful her life was as a stay-at-home mom of 2 toddlers married to a wealthy man, I politely nodded through her presentation. She talked about how she had nothing to worry about but her cuticles and even began urging me to do the same, telling me how underappreciated being a traditional housewife was. I couldn't wait for her to stop chatting about extraneous topics and get to the issue. Finally, after roughly 15 minutes of talking about her life, she explained why she was here. Apparently, she had returned to see our parents since they had begged her to do so following the accident. They did not want her money. They simply wanted her to be there for them. After 2 weeks, she decided to return, and while she was here, she thought she'd pay me a visit so we could finally bury the hatchet. Thus far, so good. But then she began complaining. She claimed our parents were too needy and disrespectful of her new family. She went on and on about how she had to leave her 2 babies with their nanny merely to visit them. She stated she loathed our parents for forcing her to choose between them and her children. I can never understand why she keeps referring to them as her children when they are clearly not hers. They are her husband's children from his previous marriage. Even though I hadn't asked, she proceeded to tell me a lot about her marriage and spouse. According to what I gathered, Allison's husband most likely married her solely to boost his chances of obtaining at least partial custody of his children, which he accomplished. But she believed he loved her or something. He had been in a custody fight for a long time, and as a full-time businessman, he didn't have enough time for his children. His ex-wife was using this against him. Then he claimed that he was engaged and planned to marry as soon as the divorce was finalized, which tipped the scales in his favor. Allison told me all of this while gloating about how she saved those children. To me, it sounded like her husband had cheated her. They hadn't known each other for more than a year when he asked her to marry him, so it was obvious he wasn't in love with her. Nobody falls in love that easily, especially after a divorce. But Allison appeared blissfully unaware, or perhaps she knew he didn't love her but was ready to overlook it due to his large money balance. She seemed content being a glorified nanny to her husband's children. On top of that, she was upset with our parents for wanting her at their side after they had been in a tragic tragedy. She somehow believed that being there for them was detracting from her time with her new family, which comprised a husband who most likely did not love her and 2 children who were not biologically connected to her. These children appeared to be doing well with their nanny, just as they were with her. If ungrateful had a face, Allison would be it. I am not a fan of my parents, but when she mentioned how needy they were, I couldn't believe this was the lady they had repeatedly chosen over me. She eventually got to the point of her visit and informed me that she was departing in 2 days. She had promised Mom and Dad that she would remain for at least a month, but now she stated she was tired of hearing them talk about the tragedy and how it was the worst experience of their lives, for the 10th time. She stated she needed to return home soon. What is her solution? She asked me to reconcile with our parents and take her place. She did not want to feel terrible about leaving them when they needed her. She had no idea they had cut me off again because I refused to help with their bills, most likely because they don't talk about or think about me, so they didn't tell Allison. She came here for sympathy. She wanted me to feel sorry for her for having to deal with our parents and abandoning her family. She intended to use her pity to persuade me to step into her shoes and provide emotional support for our parents because she did not feel up to the role. It was typical Allison manipulation, but I'd known her techniques for too long to fall for them. I had no intention of telling her how I truly felt while she was in my home because it would undoubtedly lead to a fight. So I promised her I'd try, but I know I won't. She went after telling me to keep in touch, which we both knew she didn't mean. Honestly, I was relieved to see her leave. Not only is she a nasty and narcissistic person, but she is also really boring to talk to. I could barely say anything while she went on about her dull existence in California. Her life revolves primarily around parties, stepchildren, and her husband. She believes she is living a dream, but I found it depressing. Her husband clearly does not love her, and her children already spend half of their time with their mother. Of course, they'll grow up to prefer their biological mother over Allison, and they probably already do, based on what I've heard. But it's fine since she chose that life for herself. The life I chose for myself will be far away from my family, who are undeserving of even a quarter of my care or pity. If anything, today taught me that I was correct to distance myself from my parents and sister. I do not want to be a part of these people's lives. They're really selfish and vicious, and I doubt they're capable of thinking about anyone other than themselves, particularly Allison. I'm ashamed to be linked to such folks. At least now, I've been able to permanently cut links with all of them. It is unlikely that they will be able to contact me anytime soon. I blocked Allison as soon as she departed, and I've previously barred my parents and other relatives for a few days. I believe I am secure from being disturbed by my relatives in the near future. I'll pray that they don't try to contact me again after this, because I'm much better off without them. Now, on to the next story, Story 4. My sister accused my husband of an affair, and my parents believed her. 2 years later, her fiancé exposed her lies and cheating. My sister told my parents that my husband had an affair with her, and they believed her. 2 years later, her fiancé discovered she was cheating and that she had made up the entire narrative. It's difficult to know where to begin, but I feel compelled to get this off my chest and, maybe, find some clarity. I apologize if this comes across as rambling. There is so much to unpack. Hopefully, you people can point me in the correct way because I'm at a loss. I am 30 years old and have been married to the love of my life, Jake, 34, for 8 beautiful years. We have 2 lovely children, a 6-year-old girl and a 4-year-old son. Life was very close to perfect. We had a comfortable home, a consistent schedule, and a profound bond that I believed was unbreakable. Our days were filled with the normal ups and downs of family life, but I couldn't have been happier. But everything changed 2 years ago, thanks to my older sister Lily. Lily, who is also 34, began on a similar route to mine, but our lives have taken completely different twists. To put it mildly, her relationship history has been fraught with difficulties. She had been alone for a long time, and there was a very good reason for it. As much as it pains me to admit it, Lily is a bit of a red flag in terms of relationships. Her actions can only be described as those of a neurotic narcissist. She has a history of destroying her relationships, frequently driving people away with her unstable and deceptive behavior. Lily's relationships always seem to start out well, but they never last. She has a habit of becoming very intense too quickly, and then things begin to unravel. I've seen it happen several times. She'll meet someone, they'll begin dating, and then she'll start picking fights over little matters or become so possessive that the guy feels suffocated. Soon enough, it's over, and she's left wondering why she can't find someone who will remain around. It's difficult to witness, especially since Lily frequently takes her emotions out on me. She would come over to my apartment and complain about not being able to find a man like Jake. There was clearly a great deal of resentment. She'd say things like, "You found a man? Why can't I find somebody like Jake?" I tried not to take offense since I knew she was in a horrible place, but it was difficult not to feel like her words were aimed at me. Despite everything, I still love my sister. I'd always hoped she'd find the man of her dreams and be happy. I even tried to set her up with Jake's friend once, thinking they'd make a wonderful match. But Lily's unusual and unsettling actions rapidly put a stop to that notion. She was so severe and dominating that I recognized it wasn't worth jeopardizing our friendship for her. Despite all of this, I remained hopeful that Lily would finally find happiness. Unfortunately, it was evident that Lily did not feel the same way about me. Jake and I had a big family cookout at our parents' house 2 years ago to celebrate our 6th wedding anniversary. It had been a while since the entire family had gotten together, so everyone was having a great time. Our children were playing with their relatives, and the air was full of laughter and happiness. It was one of those rare moments when everything seemed perfect, and I was surrounded by the people I cared about the most. As the evening progressed, Lily took me aside. At first, I assumed she was going to make me a heartfelt anniversary wish. She complimented me, and I thanked her, shocked at her genuine tone. I asked her what she'd been up to lately, and because I knew she had a new boyfriend, I also questioned about that. But instead of the pleasant conversation I expected, Lily's tone shifted. She gazed at me with peculiar intensity, and the next words she said caught me completely off guard. She stated that after Jake and I married, they secretly had an affair for a period. At first, I thought it was a weird joke and chuckled, but Lily was dead serious. She claimed that after the wedding, Jake continued texting her, and what began as benign, getting-to-know-you exchanges quickly evolved into intense emotional conversations. According to Lily, Jake told her that he and I were constantly fighting and bickering about minor issues. She claimed he'd ask if they might meet, which is when the affair allegedly began. Her statements made me feel ill. I couldn't believe Jake, who had always been committed to me and our family, would be unfaithful. Lily explained that she had kept this a secret all along but could no longer pretend. The way she delivered it, so quietly and confidently, shook me to my core more than the actual news. I briefly considered all of the possible options. Did Jake actually cheat on me? And with my own sister? Were we supposed to be separated now? How about the kids? It took me a while to process my ideas, but then I asked Lily if she had any proof that Jake couldn't get away with lying. That is where she faltered. Lily said she had a lot of evidence, But as her sister, I should believe her, with or without it. That's when I realized, Lily was lying. She could trick mom and dad, but I had been watching her for years. I could immediately detect when she was lying. She burst into tears when she realized I could be onto her. Then came her lecture, which included comments like, "I cannot believe you don't trust me," and "I told you for your own good." Lily then went on to tell our parents the same tale. Soon, all of our friends and family surrounded us, and Lily began shouting at Jake about how he had cheated on me with her. She even alleged that, despite her refusal to participate, he blackmailed her. My hubby was just as perplexed as I was. At first, he assumed this was an unfunny joke. However, when Lily began screaming like crazy in front of everyone, the situation became quite serious. I hoped my folks would assist me with damage control. After all, even if Lily's narrative were accurate, I would have been crushed. To my amazement, my parents sided with Lily without regard for our circumstances. Dad screamed at Jake, accusing him of playing with Lily's feelings. I felt abandoned. My own sister confessed to me that she had an affair with my husband of 6 years. Even though I knew that wasn't true, no wife enjoys hearing this type of thing. Furthermore, if her narrative was true, my father was more concerned with Lily's feelings than my own, a wife and mother who would have lost her husband. When we got home that day, Jake and I talked about everything. I trusted my husband and knew he would never betray me. Before you think I'm gullible, let me warn you that Lily has a history of lying. She has previously wrecked countless relationships with petty lies. In truth, Jake's pal ended their relationship because she accused him of cheating on her at random. She would set her own belongings throughout the apartment and then ask him about if he had brought any other girls. This would lead to screaming bouts, and when he was fatigued, Mom would tell him it was just a test. The situation with us simply confirmed this was a trend for Lily, so I chose to believe my husband. The next days were the worst of my life. My parents refused to hear our side of the tale, preferring to trust Lily's version without any evidence. Our previously close-knit family was broken. Jake and I found ourselves alone, and the atmosphere at family gatherings grew unpleasant. My parents treated me with distrust, while Jake was completely ignored. Lily, on the other hand, appeared to delight in the turmoil she had caused. She played the victim, taking up the attention and pity of everyone around her. It was as if she relished witnessing the devastation she had inflicted in my life. The more I attempted to defend myself and Jake, the more she distorted the story to portray us as monsters. I attempted to contact my parents to explain that there was no proof of Lily's assertions, but it was ineffective. They'd made up their minds, and their commitment to Lily was solid. Mom even accused me of being in denial and choosing Jake above my own sister, which shattered my heart. I couldn't comprehend how they could so easily abandon me, how they could blindly believe Lily's falsehoods. Eventually, the tension reached its breaking point. Jake and I made the difficult decision to detach ourselves from my family for our own mental health and the sake of our children's well-being. It was a difficult decision, but we couldn't keep living in the shadow of such a painful falsehood. This eventually became our new normal. As I mentioned, it was difficult but not impossible. I recognized that I didn't need my parents' approval for everything in my life, and if they wanted to believe Lily's lie, then so be it. But just when I thought the drama was over, something happened to shake things up again. I came across a post on Facebook unexpectedly, and, guess what? Lily became engaged. She had shared a series of photos with her new fiancé, a man named Mark, along with a lengthy, heartfelt caption about how she had met the love of her life. She told how Mark entered her life at what she believed was the most difficult time she had ever experienced, a time of pain and betrayal. Ironic, eh? Reading those sentences caused my stomach to churn. The hypocrisy was staggering. Lily had portrayed herself as a victim, employing the same lies she had spoken to elicit compassion and admiration from our extended family and friends. As I browsed through the comments, I noticed that many of our family, who had largely supported her during the turmoil, were praising her and extending their support. Some even made snide, passive-aggressive statements addressed directly at me, such as, "Good for you for getting past that toxicity. You do not need that in your life." It was infuriating. These folks had no idea what had transpired, yet they were ready to congratulate Lily on her alleged courage and tenacity. I felt a similar sensation of betrayal, not only from Lily, but from the entire family, which had decided to believe her falsehoods without questioning. It felt as if they had entirely eliminated me from their life, while continuing to support someone who had only caused grief and destruction. What concerned me even more was Lily's engagement to a man who had no notion what kind of person she was. I couldn't help but feel sad for Mark, knowing that he was being deceived by the same lies that had destroyed my family. I wondered whether Lily had ever told him the truth about what she had done, or if she had continued to weave her web of deception to trap him as well. I was tempted to reach out to Mark and warn him about Lily's true personality. But I immediately realized that it was not my place to meddle with their relationship. Mark would have to discover the truth on his own, just like I did. Still, I couldn't ignore the sense of dread that came with knowing Lily was once again manipulating those around her for her personal gain. In the days that followed, I tried to get the news of Lily's engagement out of my mind, but it was difficult. Suddenly, I began to notice a series of missed calls from an unknown number. I ignored it at first because I assumed it was spam. But the calls kept coming. I didn't have time to pick up because I was so busy with work and kids. Finally, during a break at work, I decided to respond. On the other end of the line, I was welcomed by a screaming Lily. She hurled every insult and slur she could think of at me. It was like a torrent of rage, unfiltered and untamed. I tried to ask her what was going on, but she refused to let me speak. After what seemed like an eternity of listening to her rant, I was finally able to convince her to pause long enough to explain what had happened and why she was so angry. There was a little hush on the other end before she screamed, "How could you claim to be innocent after what you've done?" Before I could react, she hung up. I was left in a trance, trying to make sense of what had just occurred. My mind was spinning with options, but none made sense. What could I have done to make Lily so angry? I had stayed out of her life, given her the privacy she clearly desired, and done nothing to provoke her. I could only think of one person who might have some insight into this situation: my Uncle Tom. He was one of the few family members I still communicated with, and he was always a voice of reason in the midst of the insanity. I called him, thinking he could shed some light on the situation. Uncle Tom did not disappoint. When I recounted what had transpired, he revealed what Lily had cleverly left out. Apparently, her fiancé, Mark, had called off the engagement. What's the reason? He had discovered the alleged affair between Lily and Jake through family rumors. Mark, being the wonderful guy he was, had been looking into a disagreement he had spotted between Lily and myself. When Mark found out about the affair, he was naturally outraged. The trouble was that he didn't realize it was all a lie, a fiction Lily cooked up to seek attention and sympathy. Things took an even more dramatic turn just before the engagement was called off. Mark, Lily's fiancé, had sensed that something was wrong with their relationship. Lily's unpredictable conduct had caused some concerns for him, and he couldn't escape the suspicion that there was more to the story. Mark, motivated by his suspicions, decided to check Lily's phone. What he discovered shocked everyone: Lily had been cheating on him. She'd been meeting up with a guy she met on a dating app, and their interactions weren't simply casual chatter. Mark, who was wealthy and seemed ideal in Lily's eyes, was someone she refused to lose. Lily had no choice but to come honest. She admitted to Mark that she had no affair with Jake and that the entire thing was made up. But, rather than saving her relationship, her confession backfired. She did not deny having discussions with the guy on the dating app. Mark was horrified, not only by the affair, but also by the deception and the lengths Lily had gone to in order to carry it out. It presented Lily in an even more negative light, and Mark wanted nothing to do with her after that. After Mark called off the engagement, Lily's life began to disintegrate. Her lies were now public knowledge, and those who had previously backed her began to distance themselves. The folks who had previously believed her story about Jake and me now questioned everything. Their caustic remarks and supportive letters faded when they discovered the extent of Lily's deception. My parents, who had so easily chosen her side 2 years ago, were left stunned by the truth. Despite the remorse and sorrow I feel for my sister, I know that the best thing for my family right now is to stay away from all of this toxic drama. We've gone through enough, and now I need to focus on protecting my husband, children, and myself from future danger. I'm happy for the clarity that has resulted from all of this, even if it has been extremely hard to achieve. I'd also like to thank everyone who read my article and offered their support and suggestions. It's been a challenging trip, but strangers' compassion and understanding have helped make it bearable. I am grateful to you all for allowing me to see things more clearly and giving me the courage to do what is best for my family. Update 2. Hello, everyone. The last week has been quite stressful, so my family and I decided to take a much-needed mini vacation. It was a nice opportunity for us to clear our heads and refocus on each other after what had happened. I also spent some time reading over all of your comments on my prior postings, and I just wanted to say thank you. Your insights and encouragement have really improved my understanding of the situation. One thing that really struck me was the number of comments about Lily's weird fixation with my husband Jake. Now that you've brought it to my attention, I see that there were always warning flags, but I just didn't notice them at the time. When Jake and I first started dating, Lily had a lot to say. More than I expected. She would always call him brilliant and dashing, which looked like innocent praise, but they were frequently followed by comments that now seem strange, such as how I got him or how he was so out of my league. I dismissed it as her typical mocking, but thinking back, there could have been more to it. Anyway, going on, I must say that my parents have not ceased attempting to reach us. They've called and texted us hundreds of times, and while I'm still unhappy about what happened, I've decided to allow them to come visit us. I understand that their primary motivation is to visit the children, and I've accepted that. After all, I've decided that I would not deprive my children of their grandparents, even if I am not ready to fully reconcile with them myself. While my parents may not have been the best at supporting me, they have always been loving grandparents, and my children adore them. The visit will be difficult, and I'm still unsure how I'll react to seeing them face to face after everything that has transpired, but I'm prepared to try for the sake of my children. I will create limits and preserve my own mental health, but I cannot ignore the attachment they have with their grandparents. Hopefully, this visit will provide some clarity on how to go from here. Thank you again for all of your help and suggestions. I'll keep you posted on how things progress. Update 3. Hello everyone, I hope you are doing better. I wanted to provide an update on how things have been since my last post. My parents did come to visit us, and while I was concerned about how it would go, I have to admit it went better than I imagined. Things were awkward at first, as I expected, but my children immediately broke the ice. They were overjoyed to see their grandparents again, and their enthusiasm helped to alleviate the tension in the room. It was evident that they missed them as much as my parents did. As we settled in, the kids innocently asked where Aunt Lily was. It was a question I expected to come up at some point, and it elicited an uncomfortable stillness. We all avoided the subject at the moment, attempting to keep the atmosphere light. Later, while the kids were busy, I decided to ask my parents directly where she was. They informed me Lily had returned to their home after a long absence and wanted to apologize to me. I found it difficult to take it seriously, however. After everything she'd done, an apology seemed pointless. Furthermore, Mark, her ex-fiancé, deserved the most sincere apologies after everything she had put him through. I advised that instead of wasting time apologizing, they consider enrolling her in treatment. The way she acted, lying so brazenly and destructively, was not a simple mistake. She acted like a habitual liar, and at times, it appeared she was on the verge of being labeled a psychopath. Some may even claim she is one. If she is to heal from this condition, she must seek expert help. Interestingly, Jake and Mark have developed an unexpected bond throughout this process. They began hanging together and learned that they had many common interests. Jake keeps Mark informed about what's going on with us, and it's been great to see them both support each other in various ways. Mark, being the mature individual that he is, has begun to move on with his life. He did not deserve what he went through, but as humans, all we can do is move on and attempt to find peace. Overall, I believe we are on the route to a resolution. Things will never be the same, but I am hopeful that they can improve. If the world works in our favor, we may not be able to return to the way things were, but we may be able to reach a satisfactory point, one in which we can re-establish some trust and move forward without the weight of the past holding us back. We've learned the value of open communication, the perils of leaping to conclusions, and the strength of forgiveness, both giving and receiving it. While we are not completely recovered yet, we believe we are on the right track. Thank you again, Reddit, for your encouragement and guidance at this difficult time. Your opinions have been important in guiding us through this challenging circumstance. We'll continue to take things one day at a time, focusing on our mental health and our children's well-being as we move forward. Now to the next story. 5. Pursued my dream as a photographer, lost my parents' support, until they learned about my 6-figure income. My parents went completely crazy when I decided to try my hand at fashion photography instead of attending college after high school. For months, we quarreled over this. Ultimately, they informed me that they would never forgive me and would stop interacting with me if I chose to go down this route rather than earning a college degree. Knowing that my connection with my parents was not my top concern at the moment, I did not let that deter me. My goal was to become a fashion photographer, and I did just that. They were furious with me and avoided talking to me for a few years. I found it really challenging, particularly because I was so young and needed assistance from other family members. Most of the assistance I required was monetary. I had only ever worked summer jobs part-time before, and the money I had saved was insufficient to support myself in a new place. I was in dire need of help because, at the time, I was an intern and didn't get paid much. Fortunately, my dad's older sister, my aunt, frequently sent me the money I needed to pay my bills. Naturally, my aunt had a soft spot for me because I had always been close to her daughter as a child. Even with her help, I occasionally still felt very alone. After I left home, my brother and dad began to act as though I didn't even exist, so I didn't have the support of my immediate family. Because it would cause friction between them, my aunt never disclosed to my father that she was providing financial support for me. Without a doubt, he would blame her for pushing me to make poor choices. In spite of this, my aunt informed me of my parents' reactions to my decision. She would always bring me up to them when she saw them, but they would usually still react negatively. It was discouraging to hear them abruptly shift the subject. Then, one year, they suddenly demanded that I spend the holidays at home so that we could get back in touch. In the end, I returned that year to try again with our relationship. They were pretty normal about the whole thing, which surprised me because I had expected an emotional reunion. My mother later informed me that they knew I wouldn't alter my mind, so they made the decision to get in touch with me. Furthermore, they didn't want to be seen as the type of parents that didn't encourage their kids' goals and aspirations because that would come across negatively. I came to see that rather than truly respecting my choice, they had only contacted me to protect their brand. Despite my disappointment, I made the decision to keep in contact with them in the hopes that they would someday reconsider their opinion of me. They have never seemed to be as proud of me as they are of my brother, even though I have told them about all of my successes over the previous few years. After earning a business degree, my brother began working with a friend of my dad's. He makes a nice living, and my parents are always boasting about how he started providing for them as soon as he started working. I did offer to assist them monetarily, so it's not that I hadn't. But because of my unusual line of work, they turned me down, saying they wouldn't feel comfortable taking my money because they weren't sure I could live comfortably without it. I was aware that this was not a sincere worry. It served as just another reminder that they didn't think I was performing well enough and would much rather rely on my brother. I was never going to be good enough for them, no matter what I did. They relied on my brother instead of believing me, even after I assured them that I was okay and could help. It wasn't like they didn't require assistance. They have been having financial difficulties for the past few years, particularly following the pandemic. About 2 years ago, my parents had to close the cafe they owned and retire early because of significant losses sustained during the pandemic. My brother began providing them with financial help at that point. It was quite offensive that they refused to assist me in spite of this. I stopped insisting on staying in contact with them after that. The only times we would see each other were at family gatherings, where I would try to be as polite as possible. Since I knew they wouldn't value me, I even stopped spending the holidays at home. Rather, they would take advantage of the occasion to criticize and ridicule my decisions. I was done with that negativity. I no longer needed it in my life. Since then, our relationship has gotten much worse, and we hardly ever communicate. Because I dislike discussing it, very few family members are aware of my feelings. My cousin, who recently got engaged, is one of the few who does. My family was invited to her engagement party a few days ago, but I was also invited. Regretfully, my illness prevented me from attending. After years of not speaking to me, my parents finally called me while I was away because of a chat my cousin had with them. I need to explain what my cousin told me before I talk to my parents about the phone call. As soon as I finished talking to my parents, I contacted my cousin to talk to her about it. She informed me that my parents had been boasting at the engagement party about my brother's big promotion at work and how he would now be making nearly twice as much as he had before. My cousin claimed that it was starting to irritate her. I'm not sure if that's accurate or if they were exaggerating. In addition to making the entire celebration about themselves, they were utterly disregarding the fact that I, their other kid, was succeeding in her life on par with, if not better than her. She was aware that, despite my best efforts to pretend otherwise, my connection with my parents clearly had an impact on me. Even though I had accomplished a lot, I felt like I could never do enough to make them proud of me. I found that to be really distressing. My cousin chose to defend me since she was aware of this. My relative mentioned how wonderful it was that they now had 2 children earning 6 figures annually as my parents were boasting about my brother. My parents, who hadn't bothered to stay in contact with me over the previous 2 years, were understandably startled. Since I didn't think it was necessary, I had never disclosed my income to them. My parents called me the following day after my cousin dropped that bombshell without providing any further details. I was taken aback when they called. They inquired as to whether I had been making 6 figures annually and whether I had been doing so for a number of years. Thinking they were finally calling to congratulate me and express their pride, I made the decision to be honest with them. They said they couldn't believe they had been forcing my brother to provide for them financially when I had been doing so well, which was really foolish and delusional of me. They had the gall to become upset rather than happy for me. They chastised me for not informing them of my earnings sooner so they could make an informed decision about which child should provide them with financial support. I couldn't speak. In retrospect, That was exactly the reaction I should have anticipated, but it was not the one I had anticipated. Let me tell you what occurred next if you think that's awful. My parents began to explain how they had put a lot of pressure on my brother when I didn't reply. They said that he had been too busy providing for them to save enough money for his own future. They maintained that I should now pay $100,000 in reparations to help even things up because I hadn't been burdened in the same manner. They rationalized it by claiming that they were also my parents and that I had to share my brother's responsibility. They made it seem as though I had been avoiding accountability, utterly disregarding the fact that they had initially turned down my assistance. After giving their request some attention, I erupted in laughter and hung up. The scenario was so ridiculous that it was the only response I could summon. I then gave my cousin a call to get the whole narrative and to double-check the information. I have been deliberately avoiding my parents ever since. After the call, I banned their number, but they began texting me from a burner phone, which I also blocked. In every one of their mails, I was accused of concealing my earnings. They said they would never have requested my brother for help and would have accepted my help instead if they had known about it sooner. Recently, I also received a text from my brother, who usually avoids similar situations. He stated that he thought our parents had a point, but he didn't want to pick sides. He acknowledged that they ought to have been more encouraging and that they had mistreated me. But he also said that I should have told them exactly how much I made rather than leaving them in the dark if I really wanted them to accept my assistance when I first offered. He maintained that they couldn't have known I was doing so well for myself because this isn't a career they understood well. He said that he had been the only one providing for our parents up until this point and that he thought it only right that I do the same. I owe it to them because they reared me, he reminded me, and whether I like it or not, they are also my parents. I'm bewildered now. I'm sorry for my brother, but I'm not sorry for my parents. Although we haven't had a fantastic relationship, it hasn't been as horrible as our relationship with our parents. He could have a point though, and I can't deny that. Is it bad of me to keep my actual income a secret from my parents? Edit. Since people are curious as to why I never told my parents how much I made, here's the answer. First of all, I dislike discussing my income. I want people to trust me when I tell them that I have enough to aid them, especially my parents. Why would I pretend that I had the money to provide for them? Second, money isn't the only metric I use to gauge my achievement. For me, success is about following my dreams and realizing them, not about how much money I make. When I first began out, I felt just as accomplished since I had followed my passion and defied the odds. In addition to being wealthy, I wanted my parents to be proud of me for being content and successful in my line of work. Finally, I never realized that in order to get their approval, I would have to be specific about my salary. I suppose I've had some delusions about them throughout my life. Eventually, I thought they would treat me the same way they treated my brother, but that never materialized. Before any of this occurred, I did discuss this with my cousin, who informed me that I shouldn't have needed to disclose my income to my parents in order for them to treat me like their child. At least someone was on my side, so it was a tremendous relief when she told me that I hadn't done anything wrong. Additionally, I am positive that my aunt shares my cousin's viewpoint. But what really irritates me is that my brother, who had previously been impartial, is suddenly opposing me. I'm open to any suggestions you may have because I haven't decided whether or not I should feel bad about it. First update. Hello, I appreciate all of your remarks. I suppose I needed that because going through them was a true eye-opener for me. Actually, I had started to think that perhaps I was mistaken, but I no longer believe that to be the case. I blocked my brother as well after realizing that, despite his initial neutrality, it had not aided me in any way. Unlike my aunt and cousin, who both defended me, he never did. In all honesty, my brother is only supporting my parents today because they have never given him a reason to oppose them, in contrast to me, who undoubtedly has a number of reasons. I responded to his message prior to blocking him. Although he didn't grow up in the same household as me, I informed him that I still respected the idea that he was making the extra effort to defend our parents. He can never really comprehend what I've gone through since the parents he knows are so different from the parents I know. His statement that I owe it to our parents to assist them, whether I like it or not, was incredibly unjust. I owe them nothing, nothing at all. Anything they did for me prior to my 18th birthday was required by law, not as a favor. I left home to pursue my aspirations as soon as I was no longer a minor. They didn't support me or even spoke to me for the next few years after that. My aunt, not my brother or my parents, had supported me during that period. My cousin provided me with emotional support the entire time. As a result, I seldom ever think of my brother or parents as family because they have never supported me. My aunt is the one person I owe the most. My brother has been providing for our parents alone for the past few years, and I don't blame him for that. It's not that I didn't offer assistance, in fact, I did, but they turned me down. I decided to cut them out of my life because of that. They also didn't appear to be in any worse shape without me. They haven't apologized to me, but now that they know how much I earn, they expect me to make it right. That's entitled and unfair, and I don't think I have to put up with it. I decided I didn't want to talk to my brother anymore after sending him that message, so I blocked him as well. Neither my brother nor my parents have messaged me since. My aunt, however, got in touch with me and informed me that my brother must have forwarded my message to my father. I had stated in the mail that my aunt had helped me out when my parents hadn't. My father went crazy over it, as we had anticipated, and started blaming my aunt for misguiding me. He thinks I wouldn't have deviated so much from my parents if my aunt had never encouraged me and had instead advised me to return to them and follow their rules. He maintains that we would have a far better connection now if it had occurred. To be honest, I have no idea why someone would think this. In all honesty, I would have found another means to follow my aspirations even if my aunt hadn't assisted me. I would not have abandoned them. I wouldn't be earning as much money or enjoying my career as much if I hadn't been able to pursue a career in photography. Rather, I would be angry at my parents for preventing me from pursuing my own interests. How would our relationship be enhanced by that? It would have significantly worsened the situation. My aunt is currently being used as a scapegoat, which seems to be all they need. They have been accusing her of being a bad sister in their constant messages. They say that instead of supporting me, she would have persuaded me to return to my parents if she had been a decent sister. My present bad behavior, which they say has always been praised, is attributed to her. They have even implicated my cousin in this, claiming that it is not surprising that she has become impolite and uncultured. They contend that because my cousin called them out at her engagement party, this illustrates my aunt's incapacity to raise children appropriately. My parents are essentially acting irrationally. My aunt is certain that they won't let this go, despite the fact that she has barred them. They are intent on making a big deal out of it and playing the victim in a predicament they started. I truly don't know what else I can say to my brother if he still believes that supporting our parents is appropriate in light of everything that has happened. I suppose I should have anticipated it. Perhaps this isn't unexpected because, although he never mistreated me, he also never defended me. Second update. Hello, I haven't posted anything for the past 2 weeks. My parents made the decision to make this drama public for some reason. They have posted a number of posts disparaging my aunt and myself in the last several days, and I honestly have no idea what they are trying to accomplish. They have been promoting a biased narrative in these posts. They say that despite the fact that photography is an unsteady career, my aunt pushed me to pursue it against their wishes. They also claim that I rejected their attempts to patch things up with me. They claim that when they recently requested financial assistance from me, I ostensibly offered but minimized my income. As a result, they had to rely on my brother, which has had an impact on his financial security. I'm still refusing to assist and placing all the weight on my brother, even though they're acting as though they just recently found out the whole truth about my financial status. A large portion of their story is false, and it is entirely biased. I don't want to interact with them on social media, and neither does my aunt. We've been attempting to get in touch with them privately to request that they remove the posts. I even warned them that if they didn't comply, I would get legal help. But, because no one is going to waste their money on a lawyer for something like this, I suppose my parents can see I'm bluffing. This is a minor nuisance, but it's not like it's having a significant impact on me. Many people, including those I haven't spoken to in years, have contacted me to inquire about the issue. The way they are handling this as a show bothers me a lot. I want my parents to remove their posts because I may have to share my side of the story with my aunt if they don't. Asking them to remove the posts hasn't worked at all thus far, but neither of us wants to do that. We might eventually have to publicly present our case. We should go ahead, according to my relative, but I'm sick of anticipating all the drama that will ensue. In any case, we must take the necessary action. Third update. My last post was 2 days ago, and as I previously stated, we were at a loss on what to do. In the end, my aunt and I posted the truth, not just our version of events. In order to dispel my parents' biased story, we wanted to correct the record. My parents haven't made any public remarks about it yet, but many people have left encouraging remarks. The rest of the family hasn't been as ignorant as I initially believed, it turns out. Many of them have observed throughout the years how my parents have been more publicly proud of my brother and have always treated him better than I have. Getting all of this support makes me very happy. At least I now know that, in my heart, they supported me, even though they had never previously spoken out about it. That is reassuring. But when my brother sent me an email, His reply wasn't encouraging. I was advised that what I was doing was seriously messed up. He claimed that he had been attempting to manage the problem with our parents and had nearly persuaded them to remove their posts. However, they are now refusing to do so because I posted my side. He claimed that I wasn't the kind of person who would add fuel to the fire and stir up more controversy. He's correct. I didn't want to make things worse, but I had no other option. My brother has treated me unfairly, in my opinion. This was started by our parents, not by me. I only spoke the truth to avoid needless hatred toward my aunt and me. It's possible that my parents should have considered the repercussions before making such a fuss. I don't think I have anything further to say to my brother at this time. It is obvious that he has chosen a side, and it is not mine. In any case, I had no desire to communicate with my parents. I don't mind at all if they all want to completely cut me out of their life. Fourth update. Hi everyone, my last update was quite a few months ago. I recently returned home to attend the wedding of my cousin. As her maid of honor, I performed all of my responsibilities for her for about a month before the wedding. She informed me that neither my brother nor my parents had received an invitation. They shouldn't have been surprised by this because it was obvious that neither my aunt nor my cousin wanted anything to do with them following the events of a few months earlier. I don't see why my parents thought they would be invited, when they hadn't even tried to apologize to any of us following the incident. They were not just disappointed that they hadn't received an invitation, but they had also expected one. They even came to shout at my aunt when she was at her residence. My father was incensed and informed her that she couldn't abandon him for such a little matter. Coming from a dad who essentially pulled his daughter out of his life, that is rather ironic. My aunt quickly put him in his place after putting up with his antics. After a heated argument that day, my parents are now ranting about us to anyone who would listen. I don't think anyone is taking them seriously, though, as it looks like the most of them are just looking to gossip. My brother has not gotten back to me. Although it is unfortunate, he has made the decision to support our parents. Everything went off without a hitch, and the wedding was stunning. The icing on the cake was that I also got to spend a lot of time with my aunt and cousin. I've returned to work after a much-needed vacation. Knowing that my parents haven't altered at all in all these months is comforting. Now to the next story 6. Grandma's inheritance changed everything after my parents kicked me out and preferred my sister because of a missing bracelet. My sister was always given preference by my parents, who once expelled me for having a lost bracelet. They therefore arrived at my house in tears years later when my grandmother delivered me the family's inheritance in lieu of her. I grew up in a modest suburban home with 2 parents and a younger sister, which is what most people would consider a standard middle-class family. We appeared to be a picture-perfect family to outsiders. However, anyone who knew us well would tell you that my parents and I were constantly at odds. The explanation was straightforward. I was usually the last thing on their mind, and they loved my younger sister Emma. However, it wasn't always that way. I recall how devoted and kind my parents were to Emma and me when we were young. They lavished us with love, and for good reason. We were a rather intelligent couple who were excellent at everything. Nothing seemed to separate us during the golden age we shared. Both of us participated in gymnastics, art classes, and piano lessons, and our parents were equally pleased with us. There was no little favor for one of us over the other, and I never experienced any tension. But when I started 6th grade, everything changed. There was only one test at first. I received a poor grade, the first in my life, even though it wasn't a very significant one. It was sufficient for my parents to start viewing me in a different light. It was obvious to me that something had changed. When Emma brought home another flawless score, my mother wouldn't give me the same look that she gave Emma. While Emma's accomplishments were greeted with sincere pride, the praise they used to give me began to feel forced. All of a sudden, Emma was the one who could do no wrong and I was the loose thread that could unravel at any time. I initially believed it to be a passing phase. Perhaps I was being overly sensitive. However, it was impossible to ignore. I was held accountable for any mistakes I made, no matter how minor. Emma's mistakes were dismissed or, worse, forgiven. "She's just having an off day," my dad used to say. "Why can't you be more like Emma?" was my constant question. I was plagued with the statement during my adolescence. Emma became the daughter my parents had always desired as we grew older. She was gregarious, intelligent, and well-liked. She was the popular girl, the homecoming queen, and the class president. Conversely, my introversion increased. I studied hard, remained to myself, and succeeded in my own unique way. However, it was never sufficient to rival Emma. I eventually gave up trying. The disparities in our treatment had become starkly apparent by the time we were in high school. Emma always had her own car, brand new clothes, and all the attention. Our parents would spend hours sitting with her when she needed homework help, making sure she grasped every step. If I sought assistance, they would either dismiss me and instruct me to solve the problem on my own, or it would be too late in the evening. They had begun to treat Emma like a princess and treat me like an adult. Emma had everything given to her, but I quickly realized that if I wanted something, I would have to work for it. I made an effort to keep up my relationship with Emma in spite of the unequal treatment. She was my sister, after all, and I cherished her. However, it becomes increasingly difficult to overlook her increasing entitlement. Knowing she could get away with anything, she appeared to enjoy the attention. Emma was loved by more people than just my parents. Her allure enthralled our friends, instructors, and even complete strangers. I was the background darkness, and she was the shining girl. I started to question whether others truly viewed me for who I was or if I was merely Emma's sister. The pivotal moment occurred one summer following my high school graduation. I was eager to leave the house and start over after receiving a partial scholarship to a respectable college. I believed that my parents and I may get along better with some space and that they would eventually miss me when I was gone. I was mistaken. At this point, Emma began dating Jake, our high school football team's standout quarterback. He was well-liked, attractive, and from a rich family. Naturally, my folks adored him. They regarded him as though he were their son. My parents would prepare extravagant dinners to impress Jake, who spent every weekend at our place. They were obviously already looking forward to the day when Emma and Jake would tie the knot, start a family, and have the ideal grandchildren. I was working part-time to help pay for the expenses my scholarship didn't cover while I was having trouble getting through my first semester of college. Emma and Jake's most recent excursions or Emma's academic performance were the only topics I heard when I returned home after breaks, fatigued. Nobody inquired about me or my situation. They would also say sarcastic things like, "Why can't you find someone like Jake?" What remained of our family dynamic was devastated by the charges that followed. I came home for a visit one weekend when I was off from college. Before Emma's new bracelet, a gold charm bracelet that Jake had given her, vanished, everything appeared to be as usual. Emma was upset, and it was a costly item. In a state of complete panic, my parents tore the house apart in an attempt to find it. Emma speculated that perhaps I had taken it when they were unable to locate it. I initially believed her to be kidding, but she wasn't. The previous evening, she claimed to have witnessed me ogling the bracelet and hinted that I might have removed it out of envy. I was enraged. Her bracelet was untouchable by me. I hadn't given it a second consideration. My parents, however, believed her without hesitation. Of course, I objected. My folks wouldn't listen, even though I vowed I hadn't taken anything. They thought I had stolen it to get even. In fact, my father once remarked, "We always knew you were jealous of Emma." That was the most painful thing they had ever uttered. It seemed as though the years spent striving to be a good daughter and gain their approval had been in vain. They threatened to leave the house unless I returned the jewelry. What I was hearing was unbelievable. They didn't believe me even though I had my word and no evidence of my innocence. Their decisions had already been made, so I went out. I didn't turn around after packing my things and leaving the house. I severed all contact with them. I had no other option. I couldn't continue to live in a home where I was treated like a criminal for no fault of my own. To help me get back on my feet, I found a friend to stay with. I didn't talk to my parents again for years after that. Without the help of my family, I struggled in the ensuing years. I was left to do it all by myself. I struggled to make ends meet while balancing employment and education. On some days, I didn't think I would make it, but I did. After graduating, I secured a respectable career and gradually began to establish a life for myself. Emma was doing well in the meantime, according to mutual friends. She had secured a lucrative position at a marketing company, and she and Jake remained together. She had gotten into it with my father's help. For them, nothing appeared to have changed. Without me, they were still the ideal family. I didn't hear from my family for 5 years. My life had to be rebuilt from the ground up. My grandmother, my dad's mother, specifically, was the only one who provided me with any kind of assistance or spiritual support. I was unexpectedly invited to my grandmother's Christmas dinner. To put it mildly, I was taken aback. The only member of the family who had ever treated me fairly was my grandma. She never mentioned my parents or made an effort to get me to make amends with them, but she did occasionally send me a birthday card or text to check in after everything that had transpired. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go when I received the invitation, but I had a gut feeling that I should. It was like entering a time capsule when I got to the supper. Along with a few other family members, my parents, Emma, and even Jake were present. There was a noticeable tension. Emma pretended that nothing had ever happened between us, and my parents gave me a harsh welcome. They seemed to be expecting me to put the past behind me and comply with their ideal family act. I made it through the terrible night. My grandmother then began distributing gifts toward the end of the evening. I didn't have any big expectations, but my heart almost stopped as I opened the box. A gold locket, an ancient family relic that had been handed down through the years, was found within the box. The jewelry wasn't just any jewelry. This locket was thought to be the legitimate heir to the family's possessions. Grandma was giving it to me directly, ignoring her son, my father, and all the other grandchildren, including Emma, who had inherited it from her father. It represented more than merely custom. It implied that everything my grandparents had, including their home, land, and savings, would eventually belong to me. When my parents realized what had happened, I could see their faces become white. In stunned quiet, Emma, who had always been the golden kid, sat. I could sense the tension in the room as my parents rapidly changed their tone, trying to mask their amazement with fake grins. My parents quickly drew me aside after the awkward remainder of the meal. All of a sudden, they were remorseful, as though a few words of kindness could erase years of unfair treatment and neglect. They mentioned Emma's impending marriage and their desire for me to rejoin the family, for her benefit. However, I was aware. This was about money, not about love or family. Our family had always valued the heirloom, and they knew that I would be the one to inherit everything that went along with it now that I had it. They cared for me, thus they weren't worried about mending the relationship. They were concerned about their potential losses. In a tone that seemed more like a warning than an offer, my father even stated that they were prepared to forgive me for everything and begin anew. They seemed to have forgotten who had initially harmed them. Other family members also added their voices, advising me to exercise common sense. They insisted that regardless of what had previously transpired, family is everything, and that I should get back in touch with them. I could already hear the cliches piling up. You don't want to be alone, sharing is caring, and blood is thicker than water. I was overanalyzing the matter because of all this pressure, even though it was obvious what I should and shouldn't do. Knowing that they only appreciated me for what I now had, did I wish to rejoin this family? Given that their newfound interest in me was motivated by self-interest, could I forgive them? What recommendations do you have regarding this? If so, I'd be in dire need of some. First update. I felt overburdened when I returned to my flat following the Christmas celebration. It was difficult to take in all that had transpired. For the remainder of the evening, I made every effort to stay away from my parents and other family members, but they persisted in trying to come near to me. Emma would not quit grinning at me as though we were suddenly best friends, and my parents would not stop glancing at me with guilt. However, I was aware that their goals were more about the family riches connected to the artifact I had been given than they were about family. Their actions simply made me want to keep my distance. The days that followed were devoted to introspection. I understood that I needed to talk to Grandma in a suitable manner. The locket had useful applications in addition to its symbolic significance. It meant that I would get the family's possessions. Although I hadn't been searching for this, I needed clarification now that it was on my plate. I wasn't prepared to become entangled in family money and tradition without fully comprehending its significance. I was still anxious about bringing up the topic when I saw my grandmother. I asked her honestly what it all meant after thanking her for entrusting me with the relic. I wanted to be open and honest. I informed her that if it meant bringing me back into the instability I had fought so hard to avoid, I didn't want the family's riches. Although they weren't my top concern, I promised her that I would use the assets sensibly if they came my way. Grandma patiently listened. Then she explained something to me that I didn't fully comprehend previously. She had spent years observing all of this. She had witnessed the family's growing estrangement from her, particularly following the argument between my parents and myself. She clarified that she was aware of the dysfunctional family dynamics and the harsh treatment I had received, especially from Emma and my parents. She was even aware of the fact that Emma was always given a free pass while I had to work several jobs to make ends meet during my time in college. Grandma acknowledged that she hadn't gotten involved for so long because she thought individuals should be allowed to live their own lives. However, she realized that her assets needed to be transferred to the appropriate person after witnessing how things had turned out, how I had been mistreated but had still managed to create something for myself. Someone who wouldn't waste it or take it for granted. She picked me because of this. My name was on her will, which she had already made. Her honesty astonished me. The heirloom was no longer the only consideration. Trust was at issue. Grandma trusted me to take care of everything, and that duty felt significant and weighty. She reassured me that this was about entrusting the family's future to people she knew would uphold it, not about compensating me for what I had endured. Even though it seemed odd to find myself in this situation all of a sudden, I couldn't help but feel validated. Grandma had seen the truth, and it meant more than anything else, therefore all those years of being the forgotten daughter suddenly didn't matter. But although this made a lot of things clearer, it also made things more complicated. The inheritance remained a threat, and I was certain that my parents and Emma would do all in their power to regain control now that they were aware of the consequences. They had no intention of letting it go lightly. Second update. Hi everyone on Reddit. When I return with an update, the situation has gotten worse. If you have been following along, you are aware of how chaotic my family situation is. I was mistaken to believe that returning to school would bring me any calm. I went back to my flat in the hopes of escaping the drama following the Christmas debacle, in which Emma and my parents essentially begged for the family inheritance. I tried to ignore my family's incessant calls and texts by immersing myself in my work for a few days. Naturally, though, such tranquility was short-lived. Not only did Emma and my parents keep sending texts, but so did the rest of my family. Suddenly, relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years felt obligated to settle the conflict. They were all repeating the same phrases. Don't let money tear you apart. Family is everything, and, my personal favorite, you're being selfish. The fact that these relatives were unaware of the entire scenario only made matters worse. While Emma had it all and lived the ideal life, they were not around when my parents disowned me or when I had to scrounge for food and rent while attending college. They only cared about what they had heard from my parents, who were now neatly playing the victims, and didn't give a damn about the years of abuse. Their opinions suffocated me. Before things took a startling turn, I believed I could just ignore everything and concentrate on my work. Emma and my dad unexpectedly came up to my apartment one afternoon. You read correctly, they showed up at my house without my invitation. They seemed to have a purpose, which was to coerce me into making amends or something, of course on their terms. I could hear my mother sobbing from the hallway as they pounded on the door and called my name. I went cold. After several months of being with me, my friend appeared frightened, and I was at a loss for what to do. My parents began begging me in front of my pal as soon as I opened the door. My mother was crying as she talked about how they couldn't let me go and how we had to make things right. As though I had done something wrong, my dad said that they were willing to forgive me for everything. Emma, meanwhile, was standing there pretending to be worried, but I could see straight through her. She was more concerned about what would happen if I didn't agree to split the inheritance than she was about making amends. They weren't listening to me when I tried to keep the topic quiet and told them that this wasn't the right time or place for it. While my dad stayed in the doorway, refusing to leave, my mom virtually shoved past me in an attempt to enter the apartment. They kept interrupting me to talk about Emma's impending marriage and the necessity to restore the family's unity before that could happen. They tried to coerce me into agreeing to give up a portion of the future inheritance, which, mind you, I didn't even formally receive yet, by making it seem like I was the one destroying the family. It was a humiliating scene. My neighbors began to emerge from their rooms to observe the mayhem. I was doing everything I could to keep it quiet, but the more they lingered, the louder they became. Emma stood there looking smug, as though she knew they would finally wear me down, while my mom was on her knees pleading with me to forgive them. I was stuck and didn't know what to do. They refused to budge when I told them to go. After what seemed like hours of begging, I finally had enough and phoned security. Fortunately, security showed up right away. At first, they asked my parents to leave in a courteous manner, but they refused. Security had to step in at that point and threatened to call the police if they didn't leave. It was a whole new level of embarrassment. Before my parents ultimately gave in, my mother made a huge public announcement that I was leaving my home. Emma went one step farther, as if that wasn't enough. She informed a number of my friends via mass text after she left that I had deserted her and my parents. She cleverly omitted the part where they had disowned me for something I didn't even do, making it seem like I was the bad guy in this whole situation. I had to explain the entire thing to some of my friends because they were understandably perplexed. It was draining, and I was astounded by the extent Emma would go to in order to appear to be the victim. I'm not sure what to do right now. I'm attempting to move on and haven't spoken to my parents since that happened, but I can't help but watch over them because of their desperation. I feel like I'm being forced into a difficult situation where I have to give in order to please everyone else. However, I will never forget the way they treated me. However, the pressure is too much to handle. A part of me questions whether this will ever end or if I will have to live with it forever. It seems like my family is desperate to pull me back into their mess, even though right now I simply want to concentrate on me and my future. Third update, greetings once more Reddit users. Hold on tight, for after my last report, things have become considerably worse. To be honest, though, I wasn't sure I wanted anything to do with them anymore after everything. I couldn't help but wonder, What's keeping them from turning on me again if it was so simple to do so based only on a story? What assurance did I have that my parents wouldn't act in the same way if a new circumstance arose, given their ability to change their minds so swiftly in the past, supporting Emma and rejecting me? I felt as though I would have to be cautious around them all the time, wondering if their devotion to me was sincere or merely practical. I would want to put myself first and take a vacation from them all for the time being. Don't bring me back into their mess, let them handle it on their own. My parents also contacted me again after all of this, but they spoke in a different tone. They stopped pressuring me and making me feel guilty. They nearly apologized, but I could see they weren't sincere. In order to obtain the future inheritance, they were still concentrating on the money and trying to make things go as smoothly as possible. They were more concerned with maintaining appearances and ensuring financial stability than they were with actually repairing our relationship, particularly now that Emma's future wasn't looking as stable as they had planned. To be honest, I haven't replied to them and I'm not sure I will. Even if they come with an apology, I'm not prepared to open that door again because this entire event has served as a brutal reminder of how toxic my family can be. I'm concentrating on myself and the future I want to create on my own terms, free from the burden of their deceit and manipulation, for the time being. Reddit, that's enough for now. I appreciate all of your guidance and help during this journey. I feel like I'm now beginning to see things more clearly, even though it's been a difficult journey. Now to the next story 7. My family didn't invite me to the reunion, so I showed up unannounced, shared my engagement news, and finally took a stand for myself. I am the youngest of 3 siblings and I am 28 years old. As a child, it was clear that I was the odd one out. There was always an obvious favorite, or favorites, I might say, among my parents. With their stable careers, large homes, ideal marriages, and those cute Christmas card families, my brother, 35M, and sister, 32F, were everything parents could boast about. My sister is a lawyer of some sort, and my brother works in finance. Both of them reside in lovely suburban communities with spouses who complement their professional backgrounds. Every family gathering is an opportunity for my parents to brag about their kids to friends and family. And then me. 2 years ago, I left my corporate position to launch a modest business of which I am really proud. I'm content with my life and earn enough money to live comfortably. Together, my 5-year boyfriend and I share a rental home. Even though we're not making a lot of money, we're doing okay. But my folks had a different perspective. Stable and traditional are terms they frequently use, and I suppose I don't suit that description. The subtle jabs about my hobby job, and remarks about how much better my life would be if I had persisted with a 9-to-5 have become unimportant to me. On the surface, we've always been courteous, but the tension has been for years. I didn't believe it was this horrible though. I came across my cousin's tale on Instagram a few weeks ago while perusing the platform. She appeared to be at a large family reunion. With all of the extended family gathered in one house, it was the type of gathering that my family often hosts a few times a year. There were my sister and brother, grinning with their partners. Except for me, my aunt, uncle and cousins were all tagged. I initially believed that I might have missed the group conversation. Perhaps the invitation got lost in all of my alerts. I sent my siblings an SMS. While my sister responds more slowly, she doesn't entirely ignore me, and my brother typically responds right away. Nothing happened for hours. I began to have the strange sensation in my chest that occurs when you know something is amiss but are reluctant to acknowledge it just yet. I called my mother the following day. I asked her how she was doing and if there had been a get-together, using a conversational tone. For far too long, the phone line went silent. She said, "Oh, the reunion? I didn't think you'd want to come. You're always so busy with your little business and everything." I took a moment to answer. I questioned her about why she thought I wouldn't want to attend. After all, my family is my family. She seemed to be trying to shrug the discussion aside as her voice became lighter. "We just didn't want to bother you, sweetheart. Besides, you've missed a few events before." Indeed, but primarily due to work, and not without informing them. As I persisted, it became increasingly evident that my absence was not an accident. They hadn't forgotten me. They had declined my invitation. Something about hearing it firsthand made my stomach plummet, and I'm not sure why. I hung up and sat there listening to the exchange again. I had previously experienced exclusion. Plans for many of the holidays seemed to center around my brother's or sister's families. I used to convince myself that it wasn't deliberate. Perhaps they didn't consider how I would fit into their plans because I didn't have children or a conventional lifestyle. I was unable to ignore it any longer, though, as I sat in my peaceful kitchen and watched my boyfriend work in the other room. This was intentional. My partner was incensed on my behalf when I told him, "You need to go anyway. They don't get to decide you don't belong there, he replied. He was correct. Why should I allow them to act as though I don't exist? I was tired of being treated like an afterthought by my family. Whether they liked it or not, I deserved to be a member of my family. The plan began to take shape at that point. I had been holding on to one card for weeks, and I hadn't played it yet. 2 weeks prior, my boyfriend and I had become engaged. I wanted to do it face to face with the people who should be concerned about my life, but we hadn't notified anyone. Now, though, I had my own motives. I would remind them of my presence if they were considering excluding me from my family. This time, they wouldn't ignore me. I made the decision to arrive without warning. I declined my boyfriend's, bless him, invitation to accompany me. I had to take care of this on my own. We devised a contingency plan, and he agreed to drive up and grab me if things didn't work out. If they didn't want me there, I would arrive and then depart, but not before telling them what I had to say. In order to make it appear as though I had always meant to attend, I prepared a large quantity of snacks to bring with me in the days before. For me, this wasn't about proving myself, even if my partner insisted that I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I had to be there for myself. I had had enough of fading away because they didn't think I belonged. I promised myself that if I had to leave, I would go, smile, and share my news. Although I had no control on their feelings toward me, I did have influence over how I responded to it. I refused to let them treat me like an outsider for once. Additionally, I would at least have closure if things didn't work out. First update. It took slightly over 3 hours to go to my folks' house. The majority of time was spent on how to appear unimpressed, as if I had simply happened to stop by since, well, I was aware of the family reunion. It seemed a bit ironic given why I was there, but the box of handmade cookies on the passenger seat smelled sweet and soothing. After checking the place twice, my partner assured me that he would be prepared to come get me if I needed a way out. I promised to keep him informed. The house was filled with automobiles parked on the lawn and along the driveway when I eventually pulled there. I inhaled deeply, picked up the treat box, and made my way to the front door. From within came the sounds of music, laughter, and clinking dishes. I stepped through the slightly open door. The noise stopped as soon as I entered. I knew they had all seen me without having to glance up. I sensed dozens of eyes swinging toward me as conversations broke off in the middle of sentences. My mother recovered first. She hurried over, her voice too happy and high. "Oh, you succeeded? How unexpected?" She merely patted my arm and moved away without giving me an embrace. Her eyes did not meet the phony warmth in her voice. There was an uneasy shuffle of movement in the room. People resumed their talks, but things had changed. Before my brother vanished into the kitchen, I saw him and my sister looking at each other across the room. Standing with her husband, my sister gave me a quick look before launching back into a boisterous discussion with other aunts. Across the room, I saw my cousin, the same person whose Instagram tale had given me the hint. Despite her apparent astonishment at seeing me, she nodded and smiled slightly. On the dining table, I set my package of goodies next to a spread of what appeared to be catered cuisine. Nobody even looked at my belongings. It hurt when I heard an aunt whispering to someone by the hallway, "Did they not invite her on purpose?" While I was moving through the room, I slipped by them into the living room after pausing to check my phone. My cousin drew me aside a few minutes later. She lowered her voice and looked over her shoulder. "They didn't think you'd come. Your parents, well, they didn't think you'd fit in here anymore." In spite of her apparent remorse, she said, "Fit in," as if I were a shattered puzzle piece in a family portrait. My dad was by the drink station when I left, but I can't recall what I muttered in response. I made the decision to give it a try. I questioned him why no one had told me about the reunion. As he filled the glass, he hardly raised his head to say, "We thought you'd be happier doing your own thing." The words hung thick in the air, yet it wasn't unkind. Since it was clear that I would not receive answers, I didn't press him any further. I didn't feel like making small chat with relatives who were acting as though they didn't see me, and the box of cookies I had brought was still unopened on the table. But it wasn't all bad. A few of my younger cousins approached to greet me. I felt a little better when they inquired about my company and mentioned that they had seen some of my work online. Someone cared about my life, at least. Once more, there was a bustle of talk in the room, and I sat down close to the corner and browsed through my phone idly. I simply needed time to think on what to do next. I didn't want to cause a scene. My sister's voice broke through the commotion at that point. Her face was beaming with joy as she clapped her hands. The room fell silent as she said, "Everyone, I have some news to share." And everyone's eyes shifted to her as she revealed she was expecting her second child. Cheers broke out. As everyone applauded, a few uncles made a joke about placing wagers on whether it would be a girl or a boy. My mother appeared as though she could burst with joy. Nobody gave me a sidelong glance. As I stood there, I heard the laughter and congrats. I seemed to have vanished once more. As usual, the same motif. The fact that I was present was irrelevant. The fact that I had arrived even though I hadn't been invited didn't matter. They would always treat me like an outsider and glorify my siblings. Something broke inside of me. I'm not sure if it was my dad's departure, the rumors I had heard, or the fact that my cookies were still unopened. Perhaps it was everything. I took a glass off the drink table and gave it a loud fork clink. Heads turned to face me as the room gradually became quiet once more. After enjoying the attention, my sister became irritated. I choose to disregard it. Well, I continued steadily, I have something to say too, since we're sharing big news. Second update. As soon as I walked in, the place was silent once more. All eyes were on me, all conversations halted, and forks froze in mid-air. But compared to when my sister revealed her pregnancy, the attention wasn't as enthusiastic or welcoming. I felt as though I had disturbed a sacred item. Despite my racing heart, I stood up and held my hand firm. I just wanted to share some news of my own, I said. I raised my left hand to reveal the engagement ring, which sparkled in the light from the dining room. No one responded for a second when I said, I got engaged 2 weeks ago? The silence was then broken by a few dispersed claps. From the side of the room, my little cousins, God bless them, cheered me on. The rest of the room remained motionless, as though they were still processing it, but a courteous uncle gave a nod of assent. Before forcing a faint smile, the kind she typically saved for strangers, my mom's face fell. Why didn't you inform us earlier? Her voice sounded more like an accusation than one of enthusiasm or inquiry. Her gaze flicked to the ring and then returned to me. I didn't think twice. I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, I wasn't sure you'd care. I wasn't invited here, after all. I assumed you no longer wanted me to be involved in family matters. Discomfort spread throughout the room. Pretending to check their phones, people looked at each other or moved in their seats. After standing by the kitchen doorway, my brother moved forward and pushed off the frame. His voice was sharp, and his face was crimson. You are not the focus of this. You have to put yourself first at all times. There was a response to that. A few whispered to themselves, not now. Yet I could sense that everyone was observing. My brother's crossed arms and intense gaze made it difficult for me to speak. So I did. Really, I shot back, you all seem fine without me, but I don't remember getting an invitation to this little party. My engagement is as significant as the news of anybody else. The room became silent once more at that point. My sister refused to look at me since she was still blushing from her own news. My mother's courteous facade was beginning to crumble, and her face changed to one that was more recognizable. Annoyance. I saw her take a breath, likely to speak, but before she could, a voice broke the silence. One of my relatives remarked, she has every reason to be angry. Her arms were folded as she sat close to the couch's edge. What did you expect if you didn't invite her? That she would simply remain silent indefinitely? Some people turned to look at my cousin. From the dining table came another voice. Yes, it's not as though she's incorrect. I sensed a change for a split second. Although it wasn't much, it was sufficient. The fissures were visible. My mom shifted the topic, as she always does when she's cornered, likely understanding she was losing control of the situation. Well, let's not forget how exciting it is that your sister is having another baby, she remarked, bringing a smile back to her voice. The family is thrilled to hear that. There was a deflection, so clear. She was unable to give me this moment, not even for a brief moment. Immediately, the focus returned to my sister, who grinned broadly and thanked everyone once more for their congrats. My brother gave me a cocky grin like he was saying, see? I was done. I took my phone out of my pocket and texted my lover, come get me, without uttering a word. I wasn't going to stay any longer than absolutely necessary. I picked up my handbag and made my way to the front entrance. 2 of my younger relatives hurried after me, apologizing and inquiring as to where I was going. One of them hugged me and whispered, you don't deserve this? I returned the hug and assured her that I would be all right. It wasn't loud, but it was loud enough to hear my dad murmur, drama queen, from the side of the room as I was putting on my coat. I hesitated for a moment, but I didn't look back. Rather, I opened the door and went outdoors. The cool air cleared the heaviness in my chest and struck me like a jolt. One of my relatives came running out after me before I had gone halfway down the driveway. Her shoes crunched on the gravel as she jogged to catch up. Hold on, she yelled. I paused and looked at her. She appeared embarrassed, almost as if she was at a loss for words. "I apologize," she blurted. "For everything. It was courageous. In there you defended yourself. That was not how you should have been treated." I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. I managed to say, "Thanks." Perhaps someone from inside asked what I was doing when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She rushed back toward the house after giving me one final pitying glance. After a few minutes, my boyfriend's vehicle arrived. I buckled my seatbelt, threw my purse on the seat and got in. I started crying as soon as I sensed the car moving. The tears flowed quickly and forcefully, like if I had been suppressing them for hours. My guy simply reached over and squeezed my hand without saying anything. As the trees beyond the window blurred by, I let it all out. The sobbing had subsided into soft sniffles by the time we drove onto the main road. Although I still felt raw and ashamed, there was also relief behind all of that. I hadn't just let it happen for the first time. I had raised my voice. Even if they didn't want to, I forced them to see me. Third update. At first, the only sound on the drive home was the hum of the road. As my fiancé drove, I gazed out the window, mentally reliving every moment of the recent reunion. I eventually opened up, discussing my brother's teasing, my dad's remark about my being a drama queen, my mother's disregard for me, and how my sister's pregnancy announcement had been the last straw. It all spilled out. With his palm resting on the gear shift, my fiancé listened and occasionally nodded. "You did the right thing," he added, looking over when I was done. "They have no right to declare you unimportant. We will proceed without requiring their consent." It was helpful to hear, yet I remained silent. My phone buzzed as we got close to home. I looked down. The cousin who had followed me out of the gathering had left me a message. "You were correct. For a long time, your parents have been discussing you behind your back." I straightened my posture. There was more to the message. "I apologize, but you must understand this. Your mother told everyone that your lack of a steady career makes you a disappointment. Additionally, she stated that your sister's announcement is far more significant than your engagement." It didn't seem fair to me. In an attempt to comprehend the words, I read them twice. I was still looking at the screen when I received a second message, this one containing screenshots. It came from a family catch-ups group chat, of which I had obviously been excluded. My mother's name was prominently displayed in one of the screenshots. I'm not sure why she would want to attend anyhow. She constantly makes things about herself and does her own thing. Giving up a real career to pretend to be a business owner? So self-centered. If nothing else, sister is leading a life of which we may be proud. My chest constricted. The subsequent screen grab was even worse. Since I didn't want her to show up and ruin the day with a dramatic story about her engagement, I honestly didn't notify her about the reunion. Who cares? She's not getting married first, after all. When the television came back to life, I sensed my fiancé looking at me. "What is it?" he inquired. "Proof," I muttered. I was still gazing at the screenshots when we arrived home. I entered my family group chat, which I had been kicked out of years ago and was only periodically added back in for important updates, and added myself back in. I wasn't sure if this was because I was angry, wounded, or incredulous. I sent the screenshots as soon as I noticed my name appeared in the chat. Just those receipts for everyone to see, nothing else. I typed, "Is this how you truly feel about me?" a few seconds later. I suppose I ought to have remained forgotten at that time. Setting my phone aside, I waited. It was not long before the responses began to pour in. First to enter, my brother said, "This was private. You're blowing things out of proportion and being dramatic as usual." My sister then asked, "What did you anticipate would happen if you shared this? For no apparent reason, you're making things worse. Give it up." Their texts appeared like fast fire as I watched them type one after the other. Before my mother's name was ultimately displayed, I gave them a minute to vent. Compared to the others, her message was longer. Those remarks were misconstrued. "I don't like you creating all this needless drama, and you're reading too much into things. You've been overly sensitive all along. Taken out of context?" I scribbled a response as I took up the phone once more. "I'm offended because this is not how any parent should discuss their child. This is your opinion of me, even though I wasn't invited to my own family's reunion?" My dad's name showed up in the chat for the first time, but he only typed a scene tag beneath my message instead of typing anything. I didn't stay to finish reading it. I threw my phone onto the couch and placed it on silent. Sitting beside me, my fiancé drew me in. However, my phone buzzed once again shortly after. One of my aunts sent me a private message saying, "I had no idea that any of this was going on. I sincerely apologize for the treatment you received. You're worthy of better." Another reply arrived a few minutes later, saying, "We're proud of you for standing up for yourself. Nobody should be able to convince you otherwise." Although it wasn't much, it gave me hope that I wasn't going insane. I wondered for a long time if I was exaggerating. As my mother used to say, I might have been overly sensitive. However, I now had evidence, and a few supporters, at the very least. My phone rang just as I was beginning to believe that the worst was past. The name of my sister appeared on the screen. I nearly didn't respond, but I did. She wasted no time at all. She remarked, "You're destroying the family dynamic. What prevented you from letting it go? Mom didn't want any conflict, therefore she didn't invite you. You have merely exacerbated the situation." I refrained from arguing. I didn't shout. "You don't let go of not being invited to your own family's reunion," I simply retorted. Then she hung up the phone. I decided I'd had enough that evening as I sat with my fiancé. I wasn't going to ask for their blessing all the time. A family who obviously didn't want me around was not someone I was going to pursue. I have to back down for my own mental health. The group chat was erased by me. My sister's number was blocked by me. And I allowed myself to give up for the first time in years. If love wasn't offered freely, I wouldn't beg for it. Update 4. My phone called out of the blue a week after the repercussions from the family group chat. I froze after taking a quick look at the screen. It was my father. For background, I didn't get many calls from my dad. Never. I was astonished to see his name appear because he mainly left family affairs to my mom. I considered leaving it on voicemail, but my curiosity won out. I took it up. He initially only made the customary awkward small talk. After a lengthy silence, he finally stated that he wanted to clarify the reunion. He spoke in a rigid, nearly practiced voice. He maintained it wasn't intended to harm me and referred to it as a miscommunication. I hadn't heard anything like an apology from him in a long time. I didn't give him a pass. I inquired as to why I hadn't been invited earlier. After struggling to find the right words, he finally said, "It wasn't intentional." I told him that didn't make sense since how can it be an accident to forget to invite your own child? I persisted, reminding him that my mother's own remarks in the group chat demonstrated differently, but he didn't respond. A second too long, the silence lingered, and then he broke. Quietly, he acknowledged. "She believed it would be better that way. Your mother did not wish for any conflict." That's when I heard it. My mother's voice, followed by a slight background rustle. She must have been using the speakerphone to listen in because she abruptly interrupted the conversation. She answered abruptly, "I'm here too." As though I had called her somehow. The waterworks then began. She accused me of attacking her and making the family feel ashamed by publishing the screenshots, but her voice faltered. She claimed that I, not she, was the source of the issues. She claimed that I had made everything public only to cause her embarrassment and trouble. I didn't shout or argue. I spoke steadily and assured her that I was only seeking the truth and wasn't making any personal attacks. After hearing what was going on, my fiancé, who had been sitting close by, approached. It was enough to ground me when he placed a hand on my shoulder and muttered, "Don't let them twist this." My mother's tone altered when she saw that I wasn't going to back down. After giving a loud sniff, she continued, "You only announced your engagement at the reunion to steal your sister's spotlight," which almost made me laugh aloud. I didn't think twice. Calmly, I informed her that, like my sister, I had every right to share good news about my life. No one was in competition with me. I informed her that none of this would have occurred if I had been invited in the first place. I could tell I had touched a nerve by the quiet that ensued. She chose to play the victim, which is her favorite approach, rather than admit anything. "It might be better if you don't attend family gatherings at all if you can't forgive us and move on," she remarked forcefully. And there it was, the final command. I remained calm. I refrained from crying. I simply exhaled and answered, "If that's how you feel, then fine," before hanging up. I sat there looking at the phone in my hand for a minute. My fiancé took a seat beside me and waited silently. I told him everything that had transpired, including my mom's accusation and ultimatum, as well as my dad's hesitant apology. "They're showing you exactly who they are," he continued, nodding. I lay in bed that night and gazed up at the ceiling. I kept replaying the phone call in my head. More than that, though, I began to reflect on all the events that had preceded this. I reflected on the holidays I had spent by myself since my siblings' families came first. My parents' constant comparisons of my unstable career to my brother's corner office and sister's work at the law company. The understated appearance. The contemptuous remarks. This was where it had all been leading. As I laid there, I came to the realization that I didn't deserve this. I wasn't worthy of fighting for meager affection or acting as though nothing was wrong. My siblings would always come first, as my family had often demonstrated to me. For the first time, I made the decision to stop pursuing those who made me feel inadequate. My fiancé sat down across from me and handed me a cup of coffee the following morning. He had a solemn expression. He remarked, "I've been thinking. How about hosting our own engagement celebration? Something modest, just those who genuinely stand by us." The concept sounded odd at first. I hadn't even considered celebrating without my family because they had been my default for so long. However, it made more sense the more I about it. Why should I continue to expend my energy on indifferent people? People that loved us for who we were, not who they wanted us to be, were the ones I wanted to celebrate this milestone with. After the reunion, we had a list of friends, my fiancé's family, and a couple of cousins who had gotten in touch with me privately. They all agreed that I was deserving of better treatment. I made the decision to focus on the folks who came to me unconditionally and let go of the things I couldn't control. I kept the celebration a secret from my parents and siblings. I was tired of trying to mend something that had been damaged for years and realized that it would only lead to more turmoil at this point. I was not going to plead for their affection or acceptance for the first time in my life. I had given up trying to find a family that didn't recognize me. At last, I was making my own decision. Fifth update: everything I didn't know I needed was provided at the engagement party. Just my fiancé's family, a few of my relatives who had been there for me through all the turmoil, and close friends made it modest and private. We arranged our backyard with string lights, served a variety of takeout and homemade cuisine, and adorned the tables with flowers that my fiancé had purchased from a nearby market. EasyJet ideal. Early in the evening, people began to arrive. I hadn't experienced such genuine enthusiasm at a family gathering in years, but the atmosphere was lighthearted and full of laughs. As soon as she got there, the cousin who had sent me the screenshots gave me a hug. "You're worthy of better," she said. She didn't mention the reunion, which I appreciated. "We're proud of you." An hour later, the biggest surprise arrived. Another car drew up to the curb, and my fiancé gave me a little shove. One of my aunts was leaving when I turned around. This aunt wasn't just any aunt though, she was the only one to privately text me to apologize and say she didn't know what had been going on following the group chat controversy. She was unexpected, but there she was, smiling warmly and holding a modest wrapped gift. As she entered the yard, she added, "I hope it's okay that I came?" She gave me a hug, and for a second I was speechless. "I wanted to see you both and say congratulations in person." I simply nodded and opened the door for her. It meant more to me than words could express to have her there. The folks who came through for me without reservation were more important than the statistics. Throughout the evening, my fiancé made a toast. The audience became silent as he lifted his glass. "To my future wife," he remarked with a smile, "I've seen her overcome so many obstacles and still come out stronger. Her character and the life we are creating together make me really proud." As the audience applauded, someone exclaimed, "To the happy couple." People who truly wanted to join us in celebrating were all around me as I stood there with my glass. I felt like I was being seen for the first time. There was only love, no backstabbing remarks, no comparisons, and no compulsion to prove anything. We stayed around the fire pit with a few pals and ended up wrapping things late. I was not mistaken when one of my relatives remarked, laughing, "I haven't seen you this happy in years." After 2 weeks, I received an unexpected email. My dad gave it to me. Before I opened my email, I sat there looking at his name. He apologized first. It felt different this time. He acknowledged that, both during the reunion and in other instances prior to it, he had not defended me. He expressed guilt for not doing more to help me feel included and claimed he had no idea how much I had been harmed over the years. "I know I haven't spoken anything when you needed me to," he wrote. "Even though it might take some time, I hope we can begin repairing our friendship." I scrolled down after reading it twice. His addition at the bottom, "Your mom still doesn't see things the same way," caused me to pause. I'm not sure whether she will ever own up to her faults because she feels like the true victim in all of this. I also apologize for that. Although it hurt, it wasn't shocking. My mother had never taken responsibility for anything. I took some time to consider my response, and then I typed up a brief one. I praised my dad for getting in touch and let him know that while I valued his words, I value his deeds more. It would require work on all sides if he really wanted to rebuild things. I honestly didn't require a response, so I didn't anticipate one right away. I wasn't waiting for him to suddenly turn into the ideal father. His little step was plenty for now. However, I wouldn't accept compromises. I refused to put myself back in a situation where I didn't feel appreciated. Naturally, my sister couldn't help but stir things up. A few days later, I came upon one of her passive-aggressive Facebook posts. It was ambiguous but clear enough. It's funny how some people enjoy revealing personal details to get attention. Good or bad, family is family. I didn't answer. I didn't even give myself enough time to become upset about it. After blocking her, I simply went on. Her opinions, her sarcasm, and her judgment no longer had any influence over me. Life was fuller but quieter in the weeks that followed. I concentrated on running my company, organizing our wedding, and hanging out with the individuals who genuinely cared about me. I at last discovered serenity when I let go of the need to win my family's approval. In retrospect, I saw how much of my life had been wasted attempting to conform to a model that I was never meant to fit. Because I was different, my family had always made me feel inferior. However, that didn't prove me incorrect. Their incapacity to recognize my value was a reflection of them, not of me. Family is everything, as some people may say, and perhaps it is true for them. However, rather than condemnation and exclusion, family should be about love, respect, and support. I've never been happier as I'm finally creating a life with individuals that support me unconditionally. So here I am, going forth guilt-free and regret-free. I have no idea what the future holds for my parents or siblings, but I do know that I will never longer accept anything less than what I am worthy of. And to be honest, it feels really nice. Now to the next story 8. My parents mocked my gardening dream, seating me far at my brother's wedding, but now their restaurant thrives on my vision. I was always aware as a child that I was unique among my relatives. I am a 35-year-old woman who comes from a long family of prosperous upstate New York restaurateurs. My mother, 60, oversees all of the employees at our family's traditional Italian restaurant, which is governed with an iron hand by my father, 65. Next is my 38-year-old older brother Mike, who is the golden kid destined to take over the company. I've been employed with Liberty Mutual Insurance for 10 years, moving up the corporate ladder to become a senior claims adjuster. My name frequently appeared on quarterly performance awards, and my office on the 28th floor had a breathtaking view of Central Park. I had a 6-figure salary, a cozy condo in Manhattan, and the pride of my parents, who never stopped boasting about their successful business daughter. On paper, I was living the American dream. However, I felt like I was slowly suffocating every morning as I looked at my computer screen while going over accident claims. My escape, my lunch breaks in the little rooftop garden I had designed on our office building, was the only thing that kept me going. I had persuaded management to allow me to renovate the abandoned area, paying for it out of pocket. Spending thousands on soil, planters, and seasonal flowers made my coworkers think I was insane, but those priceless moments spent among flowers and herbs were the only times I felt fully alive. I spent almost every weekend in Grandma Rose's garden, which was my genuine haven. The most exquisite garden I had ever seen encircled her Victorian home on the outskirts of town. Grandma Rose was teaching me the language of flowers, companion planting, and soil pH while my brother spent his weekends studying the restaurant industry. One day in particular, while I was assisting her with planting springtime tulip bulbs, stands out in my memory. The air was crisp with the aroma of falling leaves, and it was early October. My hands were in the dirt for longer than required, and Grandma saw it. She patted the ground with her aged hands and said, "You feel it too, don't you?" I nodded, unable to put into words how it felt to work with plants and how alive I felt in her garden. That connection to the earth. Not everyone has it, you know? It's a gift. She showed me her treasured collection of gardening diaries that day, which included decades worth of handwritten notes about every plant she had ever grown, complete with meticulous sketches and pressed flowers. "Someday," she continued, "these will be yours when you're ready to follow your true path." The pivotal moment occurred during Thanksgiving dinner the previous year. With the aroma of turkey and Dad's special gravy filling the air, it was the typical after-hours family get-together at the restaurant. Mike was showcasing the new wine cellar at the restaurant, his most recent endeavor that Dad had readily approved. As I sat there, fingering the admission letter from the New York Botanical Garden School of Professional Horticulture in my pocket, Mom was talking about plans to grow the catering business. I finally plucked up the confidence to eat the pumpkin pie and turkey. I said, my voice hardly steady, "I'm going back to school. I've enrolled in the Botanical Gardens landscape design program." The ensuing hush was deafening. Mom's fork clattered on her plate, and Dad's cheeks turned the color of the cranberry sauce. Mike snorted and almost choked on his booze. "What are you?" The wine glasses vibrated as Dad's voice boomed across the table. "You want to abandon your work to play with plants when you're not getting any younger?" Mom's palm gripped her chest violently as her eyes welled up with tears. "But you're a senior claims adjuster, honey." How many individuals would kill for your job? Do you know? How is your 401k doing? Your health insurance? Every time he saw me caring for Mom's houseplants, Mike, who had been referring to me as the gardener since we were young, couldn't help but laugh. So you're going to start gardening like a pro now? Are you insane? Living in a treehouse is the next step. Even though my hands were trembling beneath the table, I made myself keep going. My letter of resignation has already been turned in. The 15th of December is my last day. January is when classes begin. The plates jumped when Dad slammed his hand down on the table. You can't count on our assistance if you do this. We didn't send you to business school only to see you lose everything because of a midlife crisis. Grandma Rose was the only one who stayed composed, purposefully putting down her wineglass. With that quiet power that could still make my father feel like a little boy, she asked him, "Joe, when was the last time you were genuinely happy doing anything you didn't pick for yourself?" Feeling defeated, I drove to Grandma Rose's house the day after the Thanksgiving catastrophe. She was cutting her beloved roses in her garden when I discovered her. She was wearing her favorite faded blue gardening apron, the one with pockets filled with plant identifiers and trimming tools, even though it was cold in November. As I assisted her with the pruning, I remarked, "Grandma, they don't understand. They believe that I'm wasting my life. They might be correct. Maybe starting again at 35 is crazy of me." Putting down her shears, Grandma Rose gazed at me with those sage eyes that had witnessed so much. "Your parents don't see the world the way we do, but they just want what's best for you, sweetie. These plants and the earth itself are magical. It would be a sin to throw away your gift." She showed me her greenhouse and her most fragile plants. She showed me a tiny orchid that was having trouble blooming as the warm, humid air surrounded us. "Take a look at this one." I knew better, even though everyone insisted it couldn't be saved. The most exquisite things don't often show themselves right away. Like you, sweetheart. I began taking seminars at the New York Botanical Garden that winter. Basic living expenses and 2 years of schooling would be covered by the money I saved from the insurance company. I gave up my view of Manhattan for a little balcony where I could try container gardening when I moved to a smaller apartment in the Bronx, near the school. The program proved to be more difficult than I had anticipated. Landscape design required intricate calculations, a thorough understanding of ecological and architectural principles. It wasn't just about making things seem nice. My dreams were filled with plant combinations and garden designs, and every night I would go to bed feeling both tired and content. Rachel, a 28-year-old classmate with bright red hair and contagious energy, became my best friend. One day, as we were working on our CAD projects, she said to me, "You should see your face when you're designing. You seem to be speaking your mother tongue at last." However, family get-togethers turned into an endurance test. Even though I shifted from the family table to the bar, I continued to go to the restaurant for Sunday dinners. Mike would joke that I hadn't mastered the art of properly pushing a lawnmower yet. While Mom would give me newspaper clippings about corporate employment openings, Dad would sourly discuss Mike's intentions to expand the restaurant. I entered a little landscape design competition 6 months into my education. It was merely a small-scale event organized by the city's gardening association. Making sustainable urban areas that could meet social and environmental objectives was the main goal of my design. I was shocked to take first place. Even a brief item about it appeared in the local paper. At our next Sunday supper, I eagerly broke the news in the hopes that it would finally alter their viewpoint. Rather, Dad hardly raised his head from his plate. "That's good, honey, but when will you start living your life seriously?" Mike added, grinning as always. "Hey, perhaps you could create a garden for the dumpster area at the restaurant. Make it appear really fancy." In an attempt to be helpful in her own way, my mother said, "You know, if you apologized, Liberty Mutual would definitely accept you back. Mrs. Henderson informed me that your post has not yet been filled." I contacted Grandma Rose that evening as I was driving home with tears clouding my vision. As I vented my frustrations to her, she listened to me calmly. She disclosed, "Your father was the same way when he started the restaurant. His father wished for him to pursue a career in law. Look at him now. He is so certain that his path is the only one. It's interesting how life comes full circle, my love." As the months went by, my abilities improved. Small commissions began coming in, initially from friends and then from their friends. One local lifestyle blog showcased my container garden designs. My family, however, was unimpressed. As Mike continued his increasingly venomous gardener jokes, Dad would shift the topic anytime my work came up. Afterwards, Grandma Rose received the devastating news that her cancer was aggressive. She disappeared in a matter of weeks. She was still trying to give me gardening advice while propped up in her hospital bed the last time I visited her. "The winter bulbs," she said in a feeble but determined tone. "Remember to place them sufficiently deep. And never forget that you're doing precisely what you were supposed to do, my love." I had no idea at the time that the circumstances leading up to my brother's impending wedding would fundamentally alter the relationships of our family. However, that is a tale that is worthy of being told separately. First update. I wanted to explain what transpired at my brother's wedding and the fallout after my last post received so much attention. 3 weeks have passed since my previous post, and a lot has changed. First, Grandma Rose's will underwent an unexpected change. She bequeathed to me her entire home and yard, which is currently valued at well over $800,000. For years, Dad had had his eye on that property, intending to use it for more restaurant parking. Dad's face took on that recognizable purple hue when the attorney revealed her choice. "This is absurd," he blew up. Mike was even blunter. He scoffed and said, "Great, now she can really play gardener with her own little kingdom." Amanda, his 32-year-old fiancée, snickered next to him and was already treating me with the same disdain as my brother. The fascinating part, though, is that there was a condition attached to the property. Grandma's plan for the garden had to guide my development and upkeep. She had left behind thorough plans and notebooks that included ideas for transforming a portion of the garden into a demonstration of environmentally friendly urban gardening. In order to save some of Grandma's rarest plants, I threw myself into remodeling the garden and collaborating with neighborhood conservation organizations. After word spread, I was contacted by a reputable gardening magazine about including the renovation in their Heritage Garden series. My brother's wedding followed. The large cream envelope containing the invitation was dripping with self-importance and gold foil. Given that Amanda's father owns half of the county's real estate, it was obviously intended to wow her affluent family. I made the decision to go, and I wore a basic yet stylish designer dress that I had purchased with some of the money I won from my competition. The ceremony was held at the most costly location in town, and Mike made sure everyone knew he had covered all of the costs personally, but I subsequently found out Dad had played a big role. The reception was where the real drama began. I was seated at table 23, which was adjacent to the kitchen doors and literally the farthest table from the main family table, even though we were immediate family. In fact, rather than my name, my place card said the gardener. Amanda went out of her way to introduce me to her acquaintances in the society. "And this is Mike's sister," she continued, smiling patronizingly. "The person who, what do you do again, exactly? Put some flowers in the ground or whatever." Behind their champagne glasses, her companions tittered. However, karma tends to balance things out. A famous event planner who knew me from the gardening magazine story had been engaged by the venue. "Your sustainable garden designs are revolutionary," she said enthusiastically as she approached my table, expressing her honor at meeting me. "I've been keeping along with your Instagram makeover project." The mayor, Amanda's uncle, took the microphone to deliver his address, and that was the real kicker. He complimented my creative designs and highlighted seeing my work on the city's new Sustainable Parks initiative. All of the society members who had been giggling suddenly turned to stare at me with renewed curiosity. As the mayor continued to compliment the family's gifted landscape architect, Dad and Mike sat there with their expressions frozen. Amanda was trying to control the situation by frantically whispering to her companions. Following the speech, a number of Amanda's family members approached me to discuss garden design. The head of the city's Parks and Recreation Department was one of them. For their next urban regeneration project, he said, they were searching for creative designers. Mom called the following day for the first time in months. She spoke hesitantly. "I read the piece on Rose's garden in the magazine. The pictures, they're stunning. There, you've truly created something unique. Although Dad and Mike haven't mentioned anything yet, I've observed that the restaurant's About page now highlights their family's involvement with sustainable urban design. It's ironic that they still haven't offered me congratulations for any of my accomplishments. Next week, I have a meeting with the Parks Department to discuss the urban renewal project. Given that the proposed location is adjacent to my father's restaurant, it would be my largest commission to date. As Grandma Rose used to say, sometimes life has a way of coming full circle. Second update. I appreciate all of your encouraging remarks regarding my most recent update. 2 months have passed since the wedding, and things have changed in unexpected ways. The project for the Parks Department was larger than I had anticipated. They sought to turn an entire city block into a sustainable urban green space, complete with community gardens and an educational center, rather than merely designing a straightforward garden. The catch? The proposal would drastically cut down on parking spaces near nearby establishments, such as my father's restaurant. I noticed my father and Mike sitting in the back row, their faces darkening with every slide of my presentation as the first designs were given at the municipal council meeting. The parking lot they had been using informally for years would be removed as part of the project, and a community area and vertical garden would take its place. Mike got to his feet during the public comment session, his face flushed. Local businesses will be destroyed by this proposal. Has anyone thought about how it will affect the area's well-known eateries? He purposefully avoided eye contact with me. The mayor, Amanda's uncle, then raised his voice. In fact, research indicates that urban green spaces raise property values and foot traffic. There are designated restaurant zones with outdoor dining areas in your sister's design. If anything, this should help your business. Everyone in the room understood the irony. It was obvious that several of the council members were trying not to smile. This is where things become even more intriguing, though. Our family restaurant received an unexpected visit from a Michelin inspector last week. My father had been dreaming about this moment for decades. One little issue, though, was that their famous herb garden, which provided the fresh herbs for their well-known dishes, had suddenly begun to deteriorate. I was working on my project plans at Grandma's place when my mother called me in a panic. The plants are perishing. Tomorrow, the inspector will return for dinner. Your dad? He's not doing well with it. My father called an hour later. His normally authoritative voice seemed strained. We need your assistance. Oh, I spoke in a neutral tone. I didn't think gardening was a legitimate career. He paused for a long moment before asking, what is your consultation fee? He choked after I named a figure. $30,000 for consultation and emergency garden rehabilitation. That is robbery on the highway, he spluttered. In actuality, that is less than the going charge for managing horticulture emergencies. However, I'll offer you $25,000 as a family discount. They made the payment in a day. I identified the issue, poor soil pH and drainage problems, applied a fix, and preserved their priceless herbs. The inspector's inspection went well, and the local newspaper included an article about the restaurant's possibility for a Michelin star, emphasizing their creative herb garden created by a family member and famous landscape architect. My father was questioned by the reporter regarding the layout of the garden. When he had to admit my involvement, I saw him fight to suppress his pride. The finest aspect? I had nothing to do with the unsuccessful garden. All they had been doing was following an old gardening book's out-of-date maintenance instructions. They had almost lost their dream review because they had refused to seek advice from an expert, me especially. My father now has to grin and explain that his daughter, the landscape architect, created the restaurant's herb garden whenever someone remarks on it. Since then, the term gardener has not been used in a derogatory manner. The true fulfillment, however, came from an unexpected place. I was recruited to create Amanda's new showpiece garden by her mother, a legendary society queen. Her justification? The expression on Mike and Amanda's faces when they saw me at their house, talking plans with her mother over pricey tea in the conservatory, was priceless. Especially when Amanda's mother mentioned my fee, which was triple what I charged my father without any family discount. Well, darling, if you're good enough for the city's urban renewal project, you're good enough for us. My design studio will formally open next week. The prime location next to the restaurant where my father had been intending to expand was the ideal spot for me. Their herb garden, which I now take care of for a hefty monthly charge, is clearly visible from the wide windows. It's interesting how life works itself out. The irony would have pleased Grandma Rose. Third update. 3 months have passed since my last post, and I would like to offer the story's resolution. Your assistance has been amazing along our journey. The restaurant's adjacent urban renewal project began to attract national attention. The sustainable vertical gardens were featured in a number of major design magazines, and the project was nominated for an annual innovation award by a well-known environmental group. My father's restaurant received unexpected attention as a result of the exposure, but not in the way he had hoped. People started traveling especially to see that cutting-edge eatery with the magnificent herb garden created by the architect-turned-gardener. The family's skillful fusion of horticultural and culinary skills began to be noted by food experts. A documentary team from a well-known streaming service reached out to me last month about including the project in their Urban Change series. The gripping family story about how the restaurateur's daughter transformed urban gardening piqued their curiosity in particular. The producer wanted to shoot in the restaurant and my design studio. Given that local business associations were lauding the project's beneficial effects on the community, my father couldn't say no without coming across as petulant. A feature on the connection between culinary gardens was also desired by Food and Wine magazine. The producer questioned my father about his early resistance to my changing careers throughout the filming. His awkward wriggling as he attempted to explain himself was captured on camera, We only wanted what was best for her, that's all. I had an unexpected visitor at my studio the following day. My dad appeared older and more exposed than I had ever seen him before. He was holding his original recipe journal from when he initially opened the restaurant, a battered leather-bound book. "Your grandmother was the only person who encouraged me to open the restaurant," he replied softly. "My father wished for me to pursue a career in law. Cooking," he claimed, "was beneath our family." He set the cookbook down on my desk. Didn't I become just like him? I'm trying to make my kids live the life I believe they ought to have. 80% of their vegetables and herbs now come from a rooftop garden project that started with the rehabilitation of their herb garden. There were months on the waiting list for tables with a garden view. The restaurant's Instagram following exploded with pictures of the vertical gardens, and food experts complimented the harmony between farm to table. At a recent business meeting, even Mike had to admit the difference. Indeed, they were now required to set up formal meetings with me. Gritting his teeth, he acknowledged that their earnings had gone up 40% since the garden makeover. After her mother hired me as the official landscape architect for their country club restoration, Amanda's attitude drastically changed. All of a sudden, she was telling everyone how she had always sensed that her sister-in-law's relationship with nature was unique. Last week, everything came together. The success of our urban revitalization initiative impressed the city's sustainability board, which suggested a significant extension. My father's restaurant was to be the focal point of a green corridor that would link a number of nearby businesses. The catch? The restaurant would have to create a display garden out of the remaining parking space. In addition to promising to highlight the restaurant in their tourism promotions, the city provided significant tax benefits. This time, instead of calling a meal where everyone chatted over me, my father arranged an emergency family meeting. I sat at the head of the table in the restaurant's private dining room for the first time. "We need your help," he remarked in a meaningful voice. "Not only as an advisor, as a collaborator." They made an unexpected suggestion. They intended to establish a joint venture that would incorporate the restaurant and my design studio into a horticulture and culinary experience center. In order to incorporate my professional name, my father even proposed changing it. The financial estimates were provided by Mike, who appeared to have bitten into a lemon. It was difficult to ignore the numbers. Even he had to acknowledge that my hobby of gardening had become a lucrative business venture. Mom produced a long-forgotten old picture of me at age 6, displaying my first tomato plant in Grandma Rose's garden with pride. "We ought to have witnessed it back then," she remarked quietly. "A corporate office was never the right place for you. The businesses are now integrating. An exquisite herb leaf design may be found in the restaurant's new logo. Each meal on the menu identifies the precise garden location of its ingredients, and the menu proudly states, 'From our garden to your table.'" Our project was featured in a national magazine's list of the top 10 innovative family businesses last week. When they especially commended the second-generation restaurateur family for embracing their daughter's goal to transform urban dining, the irony was not lost on anyone. It all began in Grandma Rose's garden, which is now a sustainable urban agriculture education center. We are collaborating with nearby schools to offer educational programs, and the waiting list for workshops is months long. The most unexpected thing? Before the restaurant opens, Dad now spends his mornings in the garden. He was wearing one of our branded garden aprons when I recently saw him diligently caring for the herbs. He appeared calmer than I had seen him in a long time. At family get-togethers, people used to make fun of me as the gardener. Do you recall that? "Welcome to the garden table, where the gardener's vision meets culinary excellence," the host now says to patrons. I was moved to tears by a letter I received yesterday. A high school student who had participated in one of our gardening classes sent it to us. She wrote about how she was motivated to defy her parents, who wanted her to pursue a career in medicine, after seeing my tale in the documentary. Her love was environmental science. A sketch of a garden idea she came up with was included in the letter. It looked a lot like my early sketches from Grandma Rose's journals. In an effort to start our first kid mentorship program, I've extended an invitation to her to work as an intern this summer. I've learned a lot about family legacies from this entire ordeal. It's not always necessary to follow the route your ancestors paved. Sometimes, honoring their heritage means broadening it to encompass new opportunities. My father constructed a restaurant that served delicious meals and united people. In order to nourish not just their bodies but also their souls. I added gardens that help children feel more connected to the earth. I want to express my gratitude to everyone on Reddit who helped me along the way. When my own family failed to recognize my value, your support kept me going. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who shared similar experiences of pursuing their aspirations in spite of family resistance. You made me understand I wasn't the only one. Stay on course if you're having similar difficulties. Occasionally, the same thing your family makes fun of turns out to be the secret to changing both your and their lives. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.